So yeah, hello everyone, and welcome to another video on GoAWrestling. We're going to be talking about underrated wrestlers. Why don't we come up with each 25 wrestlers that we think are underrated from any era, from any promotion at any time, and then Callum suggested why don't we just do 15 instead of 25? Because you haven't been exposed. You haven't been exposed to as much.
It's a lot, and also the idea of there being a ton of wrestlers I find underrated slightly undermines the idea of underrated, because for me personally there's only a select few from my time these last 7 years or so where there's a lot of wrestlers I think are underutilized within eras. Even narrowing it down to 15 was hard.
Yeah, because I've watched a lot more than you have. I've watched like stuff from the 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s, and 2020s from like lots of different companies. So I have a much higher volume of people to choose from. But I did trim it down. This is based on a kind of a format somewhat that we do on the normal channel. This is not a ranked video. This is not any specific order. So it's not about placement in terms of the snap rule with the way we read these out. It's more so just if we have one of the same listed down, we can snap and talk about it, because it's it's not like a ranking. It's just these are just 15 wrestlers that we think are underrated. It's not these are the 15 most underrated, because I think that's too difficult. You have to do like a lot of research to really think about that, because as we both like there's probably wrestlers from like the 70s that are really underrated, but I just haven't seen any of their matches. We're basically gonna do 15 wrestlers that we think are underrated. Of course, any of you watching, in the comments, leave any wrestlers you think are underrated. Give us a little story why you think they are, because the more exposure you have to a wrestler, the more you can sort of tap into what you think. And I think the whole perspective of a wrestler being underrated is quite unique, because this is obviously a kayfabe presentation. Like, it's not like, this is not a competitive sport, this is a narrative-based thing, so it's almost like you're saying, it'd be like saying this character from this film is underrated because they weren't booked to win or something. It's a weird dynamic, but that's kind of the whole dichotomy of pro wrestling, really. But I think there's a lot of things that go into why someone could be considered underrated. There's also the fact of some are underrated by the promotions that were booking them, and then there are some that are underrated by the actual fans that watch the show. They're like two different ways of looking at it, and then some of them is like actually both at the same time. But yeah, I think this will be an interesting discussion, and I think what this might do, it might allow us to sort of reach in and get some hot takes out that we might have potentially. Although I think the more controversial version of this list would be if we did an overrated, which we could do at some point.
Yeah, definitely.
That's the overrated stuff is always the stuff that stirs a lot more heat than the underrated.
Yeah. This one was sort of hard, because mainly for me, because there's only like a couple from parts of the wrestling world that people probably don't know fully, like I probably did at the time. And it was really tricky to find people who are like known as really good, but probably like deserve a lot better in those certain times. So I have a couple listed in certain eras and some just in general. So yeah, it was a tricky one. And it's gonna be interesting to discuss them, because there's a couple here that I know you won't have any idea who they are, maybe, and specifically why I've picked them. But a majority of them, I think a lot of people will understand.
There's quite a few on my list that you may have heard their name before, but you probably won't know much about them.
Most likely.
Yeah, because obviously I have more exposure to the like pre-2010s than you do, of like American wrestling, and then you have more exposure to the British independent scene than I do. I know that for a fact because you've been to shows. I'll start with like what I think is the most obvious one that you see on a lot of people's lists. It's William Regal. And like, yeah, he is considered a legend, especially now. I think especially since his NXT general manager run, people have really started to appreciate him properly. But I think William Regal is still, even though he gets recognition now, I still think he's one of the most underrated talents to ever be in the business. When he was in his physical prime in WCW in the 90s, he was always a lower mid-card talent. Like, he was always around that sort of television title scene, which is it's not a bad thing. You know, being in a championship program is always a good thing. But Regal was in a company where they were shelling out millions of dollars to big stars. But I think one of the funniest stories about his run in WCW was when he was put in a match with Goldberg and he absolutely embarrassed him. Because Goldberg is obviously a squash match wrestler, and, you know, he's more of an NFL type athlete that learned how to do quick matches and look dominant, and he was booked in a way that really suited his character. But William Regal didn't do a squash match. He like out wrestled him, and it really exposed Goldberg massively. The thing is with William Regal, obviously a lot of his career was hampered by his drug and alcohol issues, mainly, is what let him down in a lot of areas. It's one of the reasons why his King of the Ring run was so short-lived, is because he got suspended. William Regal is one of my favorite and most unique promos I've ever seen. He has a very different style of promo to a lot of other... He's very opposite to a lot of the American style promos that you would be used to if you've watched a lot of, you know, American wrestling television. He has a very different style, and I've noticed that something that Regal does, especially when he's in a babyface role, which is rare because he's usually a heel, is he puts over his opponent to make his opponent look strong, so that if he wins, it makes him look stronger, or if he loses, it makes him not seem embarrassed by the loss. That's kind of what he did with his retirement match against Cesaro in NXT, was he basically said that, I'm not going to win this match, and it will probably be my last match. The question is, how long can I survive? And that's a really unique, you know, way of promoting a match. Like, despite the fact that he's basically saying, I'm going to lose this match, he's still got people to want to watch it. That's the kind of power he has. And, you know, the more interviews I've seen of him talking about in-ring psychology and going and seeing his matches, there's so many things he does in the ring that just make sense, and there's so many things he does are very selfless. Like, he's not a selfish worker. His whole goal in a match is to make the audience care about what's happening. It's not about the audience to make the audience think he's awesome. It's about, is the audience invested in the story we're telling? And he's a great technical wrestler. You know, he trained Bryan Danielson. That says a lot about his knowledge as a technical wrestler. He trained Bryan Danielson to an extent. And yeah, it's like, just a lot of the stuff he does, it is just gold. He has a great in-ring psychology. He has great technical skills. He's a great storyteller. He knows how to pull facial expressions really well. He's a great talker. He's a fantastic manager. His run in AEW with the Black Bull Combat Club was awesome. It's one of the best angles they've ever done in that company, and like his vicious side is so believable. Yeah, he just has this ability to transcend with any opponent and any audience in any era in any company, really. It's just the fact that he's always been booked like a lower mid-carder for the majority of his career, that I think he doesn't get recognized for how much he has contributed to the business. I mean, the stuff he did in the Performance Center in NXT, the amount of stars that he's helped make, outstanding. You know, the amount of work he's done to build talent. Even now, William Regal still doesn't really get the amount of credit he deserves for his contributions to the business and his ability as a talent. So yeah, that's why he's my first pick.
Yeah, good choice that, I'd say. My first pick, who do I go with? I'll go with, one of my picks is Bayley. I think Bayley is like one of the best women's wrestlers on the roster. Mainly because I remember back when I first started watching, NXT was slowly starting to build itself up. you at the time, just like a month or so later, Sami Zayn won the NXT title, Kevin Owens debuted, and Finn Balor debuted, and he was coming through. And that sort of wave of NXT talents was on the rise, and Bayley was one of them. And I think not only was she a great wrestler, but she connected with the crowd so well with her character. But as the years went on, when she got up to the main roster, they obviously misused her, and they misused that character, which was so well done in NXT for years, pretty much. And then she eventually won the world title, but it wasn't until we got to the pandemic where she had turned heel, and her partnership with Sasha Banks was one of the most entertaining stuff on TV before the Bloodline stuff. That was the only thing that was any resemblance of any sort of consistent entertainment, because she is great on the mic, she's great in the ring, she is really charismatic, and yeah, I absolutely love her. I think she's great. I think she is sort of because when you compare her to the other horsewomen, you've got obviously Charlotte Flair, who is obviously daughter of Ric Flair. She is great, but as a face, she sucks. She's a terrible face, and she always has been. Sasha Banks is great. She's also one that I could probably have put on this list, really, from her time in WWE. But they always put her above Bayley, I would find, in a lot of the early years. And obviously you've got Becky Lynch, who's also great. For a long time was, I would say, the most underrated until, obviously, with the man stuff, when she eventually got punched in the face and bled all over, and was a total badass in the lead up to WrestleMania 35. But Bayley, for me, I think right now is like she's so good. Like, she's so good, and her heel run has been like great, and unfortunately the last year has been hindered by really poor booking, because honestly, Damage Control could have been really cool, and it has never really been cool, which sucks, because the other two are also great. Bayley especially, I feel like, has been really underutilized this last year. Like, Damage Control should have had a good 2 to 3 months with all the belts. How cool would that have been to see Bayley as the main champion, and Dakota Kai and Io Sky as tag champions, and have them run Raw for a good couple months, you know? That would have been great. So, and they just, yeah. Now, obviously, they're doing Io Sky as Miss Money in the Bank, which is great, and they're going to have it be related with Bayley, which I think is going to be really cool to see in these next couple months. But I will always feel like that Bayley is underutilized, because she is such a great talent and such a great character that it will just always feel undercooked, unfortunately. Now, obviously, they could turn it around. I hope they do. But Bayley's really good. Bayley's really good, and she deserves better in my mind.
Yeah, the biggest disappointment for me is that in NXT, her character was an adult, but she was like a big kid, and she appealed to young people. But she also appealed to adults as well. There's something about her that's really charming and likable. And she had the whole thing with, Izzy as well, which was great when Sasha Banks, like, ripped the bow off her head during the Iron Woman match. That was hilarious. But the problem with the main roster is they changed it to, she's actually, like, an adult that never grew up. And it's like she's still a 12-year-old, and that was a massive issue. Because, she'd come to Raw with a skull bag, and she had that match with Alexa where she couldn't hit her with a weapon because she was too scared or something. It was really embarrassing for a bit, and it completely misunderstood the whole point of this character, really, which, is not surprising, given it was in charge of creative at the time. And the people surrounding him. But yeah, it's definitely, I definitely think since the start of COVID, she's been one of the most underrated women's wrestlers on the roster, for sure. My number 2 is Stevie Richards. Stevie Richards is such an interesting talent because he was in all these different companies right when they hit their peak of popularity. So he was in ECW in the mid-90s when it started to boom. He was in WCW during the NWO angle. And then he was in WWF during the Attitude Era. And then he was in TNA during its peak, like right before Hogan and Bischoff came in, so like end of 2000s. And he also had a run in Ring of Honor when that was at its peak as well. I think Stevie Richards goes underrated because he is the perfect... I'm not going to say jobber, because I think that's insulting to how much of a talent he is, but he is the perfect lower mid-card wrestler. And I think the run in his career that really, really highlights him as a talent is when he was the leader of Right to Censor in 2000 and 2001, which was it was a perfect gimmick for the heel gimmick for the Attitude Era, because the whole tone of the Attitude Era is, being uncensored and raw, and we're doing crazy stupid shit, and we've got nearly naked women, and we swear, and Stone Cold Steve Austin's the top guy, and he's beating up his boss, and it's all really edgy stuff. So Right to Censor's gimmick was the opposite. It was, we're going to censor all the things that you like, and it got a massive heel heat, and he was the leader of that faction, and he's so good. His ability to get heel heat is great, and he's an extremely intelligent wrestler in the ring. He recently started a YouTube channel where he's breaking down wrestling moves and basically doing almost a bordering a university lecture style presentation, where he gets on a screen and he has a stylus where he draws circles around it and explains stuff. People should go check it out if they want to. He did one on the Omega Osprey Tiger Driver and how dangerous that is. He did one on in TNA when he had to land on thumbtacks with his bare back, and he basically explained how that felt. And he's done a bunch of other ones. He did one on Zoe Stark's finishing move. He did one on I can't remember there was CM Punk's GTS on Collision. He did one on that too. Stevie Richards he just fit everywhere he went. All the companies he worked in, at all the times he went there during their heat of success, and he played a really, really entertaining lower mid-card role in all of them. And I think that's why he gets underrated, because he's not a main eventer. He's not someone that won big championships, and he's not one of the big draws he's not one of the people that drew lots of fans into the building and made millions of dollars for the company, but he added something special to every show he was on. And it was that special detail that you remember about a show. And I think looking at his stuff in ECW, WCW, WWF, ROH, and TNA, he was really fantastic in all the roles he did. And I hope he's recently recovered from a spinal infection. I heard he's doing better, so that's good, because he's taken some fucking crazy bumps in his career, and that's because he lost a lot of matches, so he had to take a lot of finishing moves, which meant he took a lot of back bumps, which is why his spine's all fucked up now. He has back issues from years and years of making other guys look great, which is really a testament to his ability to contribute to the business, I think.
My second choice is from a specific year. This person in a specific year, for the angles that they did, were so good and very, very much over. My pick is Elias from 2018, because Walk with Elias was insanely over. It was insanely over, and it was great. Royal Rumble 2018. His spot coming out is great because everyone is laid out. He tries to go and sing a song. I think at that time, they already had started the Heath Slater spot, which is one of the best Rumble build-up spots ever, when he is coming down to the ring, gets beat up by Baron Corbin, and every single person coming down to the ring beats him up until Sheamus, where he puts him in the ring and then gets eliminated instantly by Slater. One of the best spots in Rumble history.
On his birthday as well.
On his birthday, yeah. But every time Elias came out during this time, he was insanely popular. just for his catchphrase and just because he sang songs, and it was so fun.
That segment he did with Kevin Owens is unbelievable. The heat.
Oh yeah,
the heat he got.
Oh yeah, I think that was in 2019, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, his peak ran over into 2019 because he had that segment with Cena at WrestleMania in 2019.
Oh no, that was in October of 2018. So I can include that. I can include that. Yeah, at this time, like Elias was like massive in terms of that mid-carder. Like he is one of the most popular mid-carders in that time period. Just for the fact that his gimmick was really fun, really interesting, and they gave him time to allow it to get over. And once it did, it was one of the most popular, things on the show at the time. I remember, like, every time he came out, he would get constantly interrupted, and it was really fun. I remember a line he had when he was interrupted by Cena in Chicago, and everyone started chanting CM Punk. And he was like, there ain't no way CM Punk is going to interrupt me. Really great. And it was really fun. Elias is really great. And it's a shame that I think since 2020, he has sort of felt like he's just there, really, and they haven't really utilized him to probably his full potential. Because I think he's fine in the ring. He's perfectly fine.
Yeah, I think maybe
talker.
It might be the fact that when they stopped having fans, his gimmick kind of doesn't work anymore because his whole character is based around how the crowd reacts to him.
Yeah, I think just before the pandemic, when it was sort of starting to wane anyway, because he was having a feud with Baron Corbin, I think.
Oh yeah, true.
I can't remember if that was before the pandemic or they started that when it hit. I can't remember, but
well, to be fair,
I think during this time he was
you
so good.
do remember just before the pandemic, Baron Corbin was also feuding with the Big Dog.
He was in 2019, bloody hell.
Oh
yeah, it's one of my favorite mid-card runs. That year of him being like one of the most over mid-carders. Such a fun gimmick. He had one of my favorite stuff also is during WrestleMania, during the Cena Taker segment. He came out. I remember watching a watch along, which was a New Legacy Inc. watch along. Subscribe to them because they're great. They were watching WrestleMania 34, and that segment, I think they predicted. Someone predicted that Elias would come out, and then as soon as the first string of the guitar hit, they popped hard, and so did I, because it was so great. It was such a great moment where you're waiting for the Undertaker, and you hear that first couple strings of the guitar, and you know exactly who he is, and it's so good.
Yeah, and
it's so fun.
And that paid off. That paid off 1 year later because Cena interrupted Elias at WrestleMania 35 and came out as basic thugonomics. And I love that promo.
Unfortunately, that segment is not as good, but yeah.
Yeah. Although he did have that line. He did have that cheeky line where he says something about like, "Oh, you're in trouble because John Cena's about to turn heel on you" or something like that. I can't remember. Anyway.
But yeah, Elias during this time, like 2018, was fantastic. It was so fun. It's one of those gimmicks where it is properly mid-carder, so that on the show, when you get to it, it's always entertaining. It's one of those mid-card gimmicks that's just so fun. That
short-lived pairing he had with Kevin Owens was so good.
Yeah. So fun.
Because
so fun.
They both have like the same dry humor.
Yeah. One of my favorite gimmicks at the time, or one of my favorite just one of those funny things on shows that it always pops to me.
Yeah. He's one of the rare examples of someone who was really shit in NXT and was way better on the main roster.
Yeah, because he was Elias Sampson in NXT, and then they brought him up and turned him into Elias. So normally, taking away their last name normally sucked, but with Elias and his character, it works. Like, walk with Elias. What does WWE stand for? What a great idea! What a great line. That's so good.
Yeah, I think maybe also one of the reasons why is I think Elias actually fits Vince McMahon's idea of like sports entertainment really well. He fits that, whereas the NXT black and gold doesn't. He just feels so out of place on that brand. And also, they didn't really know what they were doing with him then. He was just sort of coming out to, like, I don't know. He just his character was really.
I don't remember his NXT time, but it wasn't as good.
I think he was called like the Drifter or something.
He was the Drifter, Elias Sampson.
Yeah.
I remember his first appearance, like after the brand split. There's a shot during a women's match. I don't remember if it's that episode of Raw, like the first episode after Battleground. But I remember during a women's match, he is in the background in the crowd, and you can see him walking past. It's very good. It's very fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the best version of Elias. And yeah, it was a fun mid-card gimmick.
And then we got Ezekiel.
Ezekiel could have had really good potential if they stuck with it.
Yeah, it's just like
because there were moments where it was really funny.
It's the same thing with when they did like the poor, sad Baron Corbin. They had potential if they stuck with that, and then they just made him rich and happy, and it was stupid.
Yeah, it was, and they ran that for a year.
My third pick is Dirty Dutch Mantell, also known as Uncle Zebekiah, also known as Zeb Coulter. The man with the very, very, very long mustache. Oh, there's so much to get into with him because his career spans, because he was a wrestler and then he was a manager when he got older. He gets a bit lost in the shuffle when talking about like legends of the past because his career is defined by the territories as opposed to being a mainstay on a major brand. But he's so good. His ability to get heat, his ability to cut promos and make you care about the story that you're watching. He was a really good technical wrestler as well. And he's multi-talented. Like, he booked one of the Puerto Rican shows and got massive, massive spikes in TV ratings booking Puerto Rico. And then he also booked during the peak run of TNA in the 2000s. And I think he left around the time that Hogan and Bischoff came in, something like that. But he's extraordinarily intelligent. And he's captivating, and he's a really, really talented wrestler. And he has that old Southern thing going for him, and it's so believable. Like, when you watch a Dirty Dutch Mantell entrance and match, it's like you believe everything he's saying and doing. He even had this entrance he used to do where he would chew tobacco on the way to the ring. Like, he would legitimately chew actual tobacco in front of you. And apparently the kind of heat that he would get in Puerto Rico as a heel, like, he literally had people throwing fucking glass at him. He had people throwing everything at him, rocks, shoes. He even had like women trying to punch him and shit. Like, Puerto Rico's insane. If you want to understand how passionate Puerto Rican fans are, watch Backlash, because that pay-per-view has a very loud crowd. He has such a long and interesting career, and I think the more sort of new age fans will know him best as Zeb Coulter. And I think it takes a really special talent to get people to actually give a shit about Jack Swagger, because that's exactly what he did with the whole Real American angle. Because, man, he played that character to absolute perfection. Like, every single word that came out of his mouth, I believed it. Like, he actually made you believe he was a racist, even though he's not in real life. But he plays the part absolutely to perfection. All the like, We the People promos, they're like, what are these dirty Mexicans sneaking across our borders and taking our jobs? And Alberto Del Rio, if that's even your real name. Just all that shit he did was really, really like risky business, but it worked so well. And like I said, he made people actually care about Jack Swagger, which takes a lot to do that. But yeah, he was a fantastic in-ring wrestler in his prime. He is an exceptional promo, and he has a really, really interesting long career as both a wrestler, a booker, and a manager. He has an iconic look with a really massive mustache, and like the whole look. He had his Dirty Dutch Mantel with like the cowboy hat and the boots and the tobacco, and he could work babyface or heel, depending on where he was, in which territory he was working for. But man, I feel like he deserves way more credit when it comes to talking about legends of the business, and he doesn't get that credit because he wasn't like, you know, a main eventer in a major promotion, like a, you know, like a Jim Crockett Promotions, like a WCW, like a WWF. You know, he was never like a big star in like a major marketable promotion. He was a territory wrestler, but he's so good, and he's able to make compelling television in many different eras. So, you know, 70s and 80s as a wrestler, and then he was able to be a manager in 1995, which is the worst year in WWF business-wise, and he was one of the most interesting parts of that year as a manager to the unfortunate real-life Nazis, the Blue Brothers, who have Nazi tattoos on their arms, which is really not nice. But him as their manager was the best part about their act, in the same way that he was the best part about the Real Americans as well, because his promos were just, he could get so much heat in any building. Like, if you go back to any of those Raws from like 2013, 2014, every single promo, he's either got the audience absolutely booing the shit out of him, or he's got them chanting along with him, "We the people," putting their hands on their chests. That he is just so, the only thing that I've seen from him that was really stupid is when they paired him with Del Rio at the end of 2015, which just made no sense. And he has said on his podcast that he didn't understand that either. He thought it was really weird, because it was weird. Yeah, Dirty Dutch Mantel, also known as Zeb Coulter, is so underrated in the history of the business, I think. Like, people don't talk about him enough, but you go back and watch his stuff from any era, he is one of the best parts of the story around him at all times. He's one of those talents. God damn those dirty Mexicans sneaking across the borders and stealing our jobs. I remember there was a promo he cut where he like mentioned Grindr or something. He's like, "What are all you millennials doing on Grindr, whatever it's called?"
Oh god.
Because he's like trying to insult like the young people for not being, you know, conservative or whatever it is that the Zeb Coulter character is supposed to be. Zeb Coulter was kind of before your time, I think, just before your time, wasn't he?
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Yeah. But I assume you've seen some of his stuff, right?
Bits and pieces, yeah.
Yeah, he's one of those ones that people don't talk about, but when you mention his name, you're like, "Oh yeah, I remember him. I remember his racist promos."
My third choice is another mid-carder and another really fun gimmick. My number 3 pick is Damien Mizdow.
I have a sort of stab because I've got Damien Sandow as a whole as my fourth choice. Anyway,
yeah, we can count that. That's fine. Yeah, Damien Mizdow was that first comedy mid-card gimmick that I'd ever seen, because it was literally around this time where he was teaming with, in an angle with Miz, around the time on the build-up to WrestleMania 31, when eventually it culminates in him chucking him out in the Battle Royal. But these months watching this story was so fun, because Damien Sandow is great. He is a great comedy character and a great comedy performer. He is so clever. He was so clever during this time with this gimmick, and how he took it far and beyond what it probably was meant to be and turned it into
Did you realize this was all his idea? He didn't even pitch it to them. He just went out to do the match and he just did it on the fly, and the crowd like loved it, and they're just like, keep doing that, keep doing that.
Because it's great, because it's really fun.
And remember, in the months leading up to that,
The Miz is so fun.
It's because in the months leading up to that, this is after he'd lost the cash-in. He went on a losing streak, and then he started coming out as different characters every week. So he would like play all these different... There was one where he played Vince McMahon, and it was absolutely hilarious. He like perfectly... He cut a promo as Vince McMahon, and it was like the mannerisms and the voice and the cadence was just... His ability to mimic people is so talented. And fun fact, you know, in like the SmackDown versus Raw games and all that, how there's they motion capture entrances and all that. So Damien Sandow is one of the guys that would do the motion capture for a lot of the entrances because he could do them literally spot on.
Anytime he did any sort of copying of The Miz, it was always so insane. Even when he was being absolutely embarrassed and he would manage to copy it was so fun. It was such a fun gimmick. And then the real shame of it all is they build it up really well to WrestleMania in the Battle Royal. He eliminates Miz. First off, he doesn't win it, which is stupid. They give it to Big Show because he has to win it. Because he has to win one of these fucking things.
Because the Big Show has to ruin everything, as we established in the Money in the Bank cash-in video.
Yes, of course he does, yeah. Then they don't even really have a proper feud. They have a really shit feud, and then that's it. And then he goes on and does, you know...
Macho Man,
the Mega Powers with Curtis. Yeah, he does it with Curtis Axel, which, in a sense, maybe could have been funny, but it wasn't really. It was sort of lame. Really.
He had that match where... He had that match where it was like, who gets the ownership to be called The Miz, and he lost it.
Mm-hmm. And it was, how fun would that have been for like a couple months if he actually won that match? That would have been fun.
Yep.
It's a real shame because this whole build up to that feud was so fun, and you could have just made it really silly because that's what the feud was. But it was also playing in the Miz's insecurities. You know, it was really fun and interesting, and Sandow's he's a great comedy performer. He is. He's a great promo. He's a great character builder as well.
He is an exceptional sports entertainer. Let's say that.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is why I specifically went for Mizdow, because that was the first proper comedy gimmick I'd ever watched. And I absolutely loved it because it went from being this thing that wasn't like the most popular thing on the show, but as the months went by, at the end of 2014 and the beginning of 2015, the sort of build up to that moment at Mania, so well built up to naturally. It was amazing. Damien Mizdow was more over than Roman Reigns going into that WrestleMania. It was. It was a louder pop. It was a much louder pop.
If they had had a match, you know the crowd would have cheered for him.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And yeah, he's
such a great character.
Yeah, I snapped. He's my fourth choice. And that's his phenomenally underrated babyface run. I would extend that to his phenomenally underrated heel run as well, as the intellectual savior of the masses. Because when he debuted in 2012 on the main roster, and he came out and he said, "These miscreants do not deserve to see my match." So then he just walks to the back and gets replaced by someone else. And he, like, for weeks refused to have matches because he just believed that no one in this audience deserved to see him. But he was just this never-ending, week-to-week, just non-stop. He's always got something new that's entertaining. Every single week he came out with something new to add on to his character. And like the whole feud he had with Sheamus where he's like, "You cannot untie this Gordian knot." Like, it's just like, it's the most... It is comedy, but it's comedy from a heel. So he's able to make the crowd boo him, but he's also able to make them entertained at the same time. So it's like, they like the situations he sets up for the audience to watch, but he also gets heat as well, which is quite talented. But Sandow he's a really, really good actor. He has really good facial dramatic presentation. He has a really, really eloquent way of speaking. And he can come across as really fun and goofy, and you know, when he did the Mizdow imitation stunt double thing, it's super charming and, you know, it's endearing in a way, but he can also come across as really smarmy and pretentious as a heel as well. And it's I loved his tag team with Cody Rhodes when they were Rhodes Scholars. The heel team they had together was just, it was awesome. And the biggest shame with that run is their WrestleMania match got cancelled because Triple H versus Brock Lesnar went on too long, which Triple H matches tend to do that. But yeah, Sandow was always a highlight, and as we talked about in the Money in the Bank video, his run with the briefcase is just so good. The feud with Cody,
very good,
and the custom briefcase, and then when he transitioned, like, he used to do this whole thing where he would wear like pink knee pads and purple trunks, or like the opposite, and he came out looking so just, it was just so, because he came out wearing this almost like a bathrobe, and he wore like a bathrobe, and he had these pink trunks, and it was so just brilliant for heel heat. And he used to do this almost, because you know how you have like the people's elbow and the Hogan leg drop and the 5-knuckle shuffle and all that. So he used to do this elbow drop where he would almost do like a Beethoven swish with the finger, and he would like look at the sky, and then he would swing his arm around and then give like an elbow drop. It's just the way he embodied this character was just like every single detail, from the moment he walks out in his entrance and the way he looks at the crowd, and then to the way he speaks in the microphone, to every little detail of everything he does in the ring, to when he walks out of every match. Like, you watch any segment he's in from 2012, 2013 in that run, and the amount of attention to detail he puts into his work is just so good. Which is why it's so depressing and gutting to watch that cash-in match he had with Cena, where he loses the briefcase and doesn't win the title, because he was on a fucking roll in 2013. He was at the peak of his powers, and he'd transitioned out of the pink trunks and then got into black trunks, and he started to cut more serious promos, where he was like really starting to become a bit more like, it's not just about me being the intellectual savior of the masses and being all like haha, and almost doing a modern version of the Genius, which is played by Randy Savage's brother Lenny Poffo in the 80s. But he genuinely became quite sadistic in some senses. And he's an underrated wrestler as well. He has really good in-ring psychology. Mm-hmm. And the thing that he does best, and this is again kind of linking to what I said about Dirty Dutch Mantel with Puerto Rico, is that he also wrestled in Puerto Rico, so he knows how to deal with hostile crowds and get heat from them. But what Damien Sandow does in the ring is every move he does is designed to get reactions out of the audience. He's trying to push the crowd to pay attention to the story he's telling, which he's really good at doing. Yeah. And like I just love the whole like almost like the fake pretentious politeness that his character would do. He would say, "You're welcome," for indulging in his presence. Allow me to indulge you for one moment. And like the way he would use the big words, the big vocabulary to almost express how much more intelligent and knowledgeable and well-researched he was compared to all these miscreants in the audience tonight. Yeah. Oh, and
so good.
I remember it was like very shortly after he debuted, it was Raw 1000, and he interrupted DX during Raw 1000. Yeah. And he's like, "Look at all these degenerates here." And then like they do this whole like group chat, and he thinks that he's invited and he's not, and he's just like, "Oh no, you're not part of this." And he like tries to push his head around and get involved in the DX group conversation because it's just so funny. Yeah, he's a fantastic entertainer for sure, and I remember the day he got released, I was just like, oh, Vince McMahon, you don't even know what you have. Like, you call yourself a sports entertainment company, and you have a guy like Damien Sandow, who is like the personification of sports entertainment. It's like, what are you doing? Big mistake. Yeah, so underrated, for sure. But for both runs, for the heel run and the babyface run, he excelled at both. Anyway, who is your fourth choice?
My fourth choice is probably the best talker on my section of list. My number 4 is Eddie Kingston, AEW specifically.
Ooh, love Eddie Kingston.
Yeah, I think Eddie Kingston. I've only known Eddie for since just before Punk debuted, because I wasn't watching AEW during the pandemic that much, so my knowledge of him wasn't that. I didn't know much about him at all.
Yeah, he's been around for ages.
He's been around for ages. He's a long-time vet.
Mm.
But since that feud with Punk, he is probably the best talker I've seen, just from the fact that there's an edge to it that it literally him, because that's the kind of person he is. Eddie Kingston is probably one of the best talkers at making you properly believe in him and what he's talking about. I remember that promo he had where he's on the verge of breaking down, talking, and I think it was like Tony Khan is responsible for this match that's going to happen, and him sort of being seemingly quite emotional, and then instantly goes back to Eddie Kingston in an instant. It's one of my favorite promo moments from him.
Mm-hmm.
And just in general, he is such an underutilized wrestler, because you can absolutely build him up to being a world champion.
100%.
Honestly, I feel like he should be having matches I would probably say as fun as the Fatal 4-Way feud at Double or Nothing was. I feel like Eddie Kingston by now should be having a feud with MJF. Honestly, he really should be, because I feel like that's such a great character potential.
Well,
for a feud,
I think
it don't do that during his feud, during MJF's run with the title. It'll be a massively wasted opportunity.
Well, my take on that is I think they need to do that, because you know how the whole thing of with MJF's character is the bidding war of 2024.
Mm-hmm.
If it were up to me, I think Eddie needs to be the person that beats MJF for the belt at the end of the year.
True. That's why I would have, if I was booking Eddie Kingston, I would put him in a title feud with MJF at Double or Nothing, and then wait till near the end of the year and have him beat him then.
And can you imagine the promos between those two?
Exactly. Not only the promos, but the amount of character work that could be done.
Yeah.
Between the two, because MJF would also kind of qualify on this, but not really, because he is world champion and he is very well highly regarded. But he is that wrestler on Twitter. A lot of people, especially during the Double or Nothing build, were really seemingly just playing into that type of he's just a shooty promo guy. He's gonna ring, but that's the sort of person he is. When really MJF is the last couple of weeks on Dynamite with his feud with / friendship with Adam Cole have proven that he is one of the cleverest minds in wrestling. He knows how to. It's such simple booking, but to get a suicide dive to have one of the biggest pops on the show, to have a double clothesline be one of the biggest pops in of a show. It's the most simple shit, yet it is so brilliantly booked.
To bring this back to Eddie Kingston, Revolution 2022 against Chris Jericho, when he won the match, he got one of the biggest pops of the night. What move did he do?
Yeah.
He did a fucking he like stretched his arm around his body. He did It's the most simple submission move. He just like winded his arm around his body and stretched it. And again, what's his finishing move? It's a spinning back fist.
Yeah. That moment during the Punk match right at the start is like one of the best moments, I think, of Punk's run. Really. That is such a great moment based coming off their promo on Rampage before the pay-per-view is fucking so good. And the match itself is so great. Eddie is like one of the best performers in the company.
To put things in perspective, Eddie Kingston hitting a spinning back fist gets more of a pop than Sammy Guevara hitting a 630 senton. Because that's the kind of storyteller he is. He makes you care about him winning or losing. You know? That's what Eddie is able to do. He makes you not only want to see the matches, but he makes you desperately want to see him win or lose. And I feel that when I watch an Eddie Kingston match, and especially a really big Eddie Kingston match, and I remember because we watched Revolution 2022 together at the same time, and we were absolutely desperate for him to beat Chris Jericho. We were just like, we need him to win. We need him to win. And when he did win, it was such a satisfying feeling to see him beat him. And then there's other little details, like his whole ongoing feud with Claudio Castagnoli is just masterwork. Because it's based on real beef, right, from ages ago in Chikara. But like the whole detail of like last year's Blood and Guts match, how Eddie was on the same team as Claudio, and Eddie wanted to win and get vengeance on Chris Jericho, but Claudio won the match for the team, and Eddie was pissed off. And he won it like right next to him as well, because Claudio made Matt Menard submit. And it's the same thing of like Eddie's whole love-hate friendship with Jon Moxley is one of the best, most intricately told stories they've done in AEW. Like the whole thing is like, why are you hanging around this scumbag Claudio? You know, like the way he comes down to the ring and he like stares fucking daggers down Claudio's eyes and all that. And that thing they did recently where they steel chaired the shit out of Eddie, and Moxley had to basically look in the opposite direction because he didn't want to see it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
he's one of the best characters in AEW as well.
And I think one of the main reasons why Eddie is such a great character and talker and believable talker is because he has been through a lot in his life. His life experiences have been really, really extreme, you know, growing up on the streets of Yonkers. He's been involved in a lot of really dangerous crime, you know, on the streets. And he's gone through a lot of really, really, really big challenges in his mental health. You know, things like suicide and drug issues, alcohol issues. He's been through a lot. And AEW is the first time in his career that he's actually been able to express himself on a major platform. Because Eddie Kingston doesn't fit the mold of someone who should be on television, but that's what makes him so relatable. Is that we all know someone like Eddie Kingston, you know, that lives in the neighborhood. And he really there's a lot of people in life that have been through a lot of hard shit that live in like really, really high, you know, really, really tricky areas, you know, of certain suburbs or whatever, that see Eddie Kingston and they feel a connection because they understand where he's coming from, like the struggles he's been through, which is why it's so satisfying to see him win, because he's not just like an underdog in the wrestling sense, he's an underdog in the sense of life itself, in the sense of you can see he has so many battle scars, like mentally, physically, health-wise, emotionally. Like, he's been through so much. He's seen friends die, you know, in front of him. He said things like, you know, there was a promo where I think it was the promo where he won the New Japan Strong Openweight Championship recently, where he was in tears. And he said, like, if anyone out there doesn't think they can do it, they should know that the person I am, I should be in jail right now, and yet here I am standing with a championship that represents my favorite, most inspired form of pro wrestling, which is, the Japanese openweight style. And it's like, it's so inspirational to see this guy in his element. So I definitely think, yeah, you definitely make a case. The only thing that's, I guess the only thing that's not underrated about him is that the fans do pop for him always. It's more about where he's positioned, right? Where he's underrated, because it's very clear that the fans love Eddie Kingston. And they always have. Ever since he came into AEW, he's always been a fan favorite. Like, he came in 2020 during the pandemic, so you didn't really get a real feel of what his connection was with the fans until the fans came back. And then when the fans came back, he had that feud with Miro, where he did the "redeem these nuts." And like you said, the feud with CM Punk that he had at Full Gear 2021 was really what propelled him to being, holy shit, this is one of the best guys in the world in this business. Like, that promo on Rampage with CM Punk is an all-timer. He's like, "Well, you looking at me that way because I'm fat? Because I like to eat a bit too much? Huh? You judging me, you narcissistic prick?" Like, it's just so good. Everything he says and the way he reacts and the way that he's able to control a crowd, like the way he's able to make them loud or make them silent.
And that time, Punk was like, it was still on the high of Punk, like coming back. He was still very much on that high, because Eddie is so good, he managed to turn a lot of people on Punk.
Yeah,
and even at that then, with his promo, which is such a good promo. And
you just go to any episode of Dynamite when you hear that theme song hit and how like the crowd goes crazy. Whenever the world is cold, better rock bundle up. The world is cold, better bundle up. See you stab you better knuckle up. Come on! Like, whenever that comes on, the crowd always goes crazy.
Oh yeah, it's a good theme for a gang of pop.
Yep. God, Mikey Ruckus is so talented. But yeah. Damn. Make Eddie the world champion. Yeah. I dare you. I dare you, Tony Khan. Do it.
They have to, after this, because I don't know how long the Cole stuff is going to last for. I don't know if they're going to probably stick to their plans and have them fire either all in or out. But regardless, Eddie needs to have that title feud with MGF, because I feel like that is ripe with character potential.
You have insanely amazing promos on the table to be done with that feud.
You have the character in Eddie, who is the person, like you said, who's had the roughest life most people can have, compared to MJF, who
comes from he comes from the rich part of New York.
Yeah, but you can also turn that with MJF with his backstory, which is one of MJF's best things about him, is his backstory of him being, marginalized by people when he was younger, when he was basically abused for being a Jew. That stuff. You can turn that and have it be such a great character moment for him, because that's one of his best, abilities as a character.
If they're able to get either Full Gear or the Winter is Coming Dynamite in New York, that would be amazing.
That would be good. I feel like, you have to. I would say, for just to go on MGF a little bit, I would say you keep the belt on him until the last possible show of the year. That's, I think, the best way to do it. It's sort of predictable, but I feel like it is rife for character that it be Eddie is the one who defends him. You could have Ricky Starks do it. You could, because he was the feud at the start of the year, him being the one at the end. That could be good potential. But for me, Eddie, I feel like is the choice because it's so rife for
Also,
a great story being told.
Also, my case for that one, Ricky Starks is still young. He has a lot of time left to win the world title.
Yeah, exactly.
If Eddie's gonna win the title, it's got to be like within the next year or two. You got to strike while the iron is hot, and he is reaching the tail end of his physical prime. If not, he has already surpassed it. I think he's able to still have great matches because he's just so fucking tough that he could just push through it no matter what, even though he is getting on the older side now. But man, earlier today I was on Twitter and that debut promo he did against Cody Rhodes came up on, and it's just so good. It's so good.
Oh yeah, I think I saw that as well. Yeah.
The way he's just literally, this is his first ever appearance on Dynamite, and within like 30 seconds, he's already an absolute superstar. Just like the way he's able to control a room. I remember one time during his feud with Jericho, he was able to stop the What chants because they were chanting What.
Yeah, my man, show some respect. You know, Steve Austin isn't here.
Yeah.
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 Really good.
Oh, and then that feud he had with Jericho, like the way Jericho was like trying to like play pretend gangster with him, and then like Eddie went all psycho on him. Like he would call him.
Went very psycho on him.
He like called him on the phone when he was on commentary, and he like genuinely scared the shit out of him. He's like, my man, brother, when you're gonna put a hit on someone, you know that means I'm gonna put you in the ground, Chris. Oh, it's just amazing. But yeah, it sucks that Santana and Ortiz had a falling out, because that like trio together was really they're like dynamic with the promos they were doing at the time was so good. Fucking miss Santana. I haven't put Santana on my list, but he is underrated for sure. We haven't seen him in like a year because he got injured in the Blood and Guts last year. Yeah, probably gonna ride out his contract, to be honest. I wouldn't be surprised if he went back to Impact Wrestling. Santana, which is it's a shame because he's fucking great wrestler, great promo, great charisma. The promos that Santana did on Chris Jericho after the Inner Circle split was so good. Whenever Ortiz would be like, you know, Christopher, my fifth choice is a women's wrestler. My fifth choice is Jazz. Jazz is so under-recognized because in that era, I mean, she came up in ECW, but when after ECW folded and, you know, they were basically acquired by Vince around the same time as WCW, Jazz became part of the WWE roster. And she was around at the same time as Trish Stratus and Lita. But when people talk about women's wrestling from that time, they don't ever mention her, which doesn't make... I don't understand that, because Jazz is on par with them, for sure. She's a fantastic athlete. She has a really unique, strong ability and presence. And she had a badass aura. And she was genuinely one of the best women's wrestlers from that era, on par with Trish and Lita. But for some reason she doesn't get mentioned, which is strange. She had a WrestleMania triple threat with Trish and Lita, and it's one of the best women's matches at WrestleMania before sort of pre-2016. You know, when they actually started to take the women's stuff seriously. Sort of like WrestleMania 32 onwards. But yeah, she's fantastic, and she's had a great run in her career. I don't understand why she's not in the Hall of Fame, because she absolutely deserves it. She deserves it more than fucking Tori Wilson and who's some other women's wrestlers they put in. They put in some really strange choices at some point. Like what did Tori Wilson do outside of being hot for the wrestling business? What did Stacy Keibler do?
Business.
What did Stacy Keibler do for the business outside of being hot? I can tell you what Jazz did. Jazz wrestled men in ECW and was genuinely believable. Because she is that level of athlete and presence. And yeah, I don't have much more to say than that. She is just a genuinely legendary women's wrestler, and yet WWE just never mention her. I mean, maybe there's some kind of backstage heat that I don't know about, but I genuinely don't understand what the deal is, because she just is underrated for the fact that she should be talked about way more. And yet I've watched a lot of WWE television from like 2009 to now. I've watched a good bulk of it. I can't remember a single time her name was mentioned. Not once. Not by any commentary, not by any promos, nothing. Not video packages. Not even like, go watch this match on the WWE Network. I can't remember it. She does get recognition in Impact. You know, the Impact Wrestling have definitely featured her as a legend. But I don't understand why the WWE don't recognize her, because she's great. So yeah. Definitely deserving of the underrated list, I think. Especially when you look at the state of the women's division from that era. She's one of the only ones where I would actually say go back and watch the matches. It's like Trish Lita, her, and Molly Holly, and maybe one other. Oh, Victoria, I'd say, as well, who also almost made this list. In fact, there's people on the current roster. I'd rather watch a Jazz match than a Lacey Evans match. I'd rather watch a Jazz match than a Dana Brooke match. I'd rather watch a Jazz match than a Tamina match. I'd rather watch a Jazz match than a Nia Jax match, for sure. For sure. So yeah. I'll say this. I'd rather watch a Jazz match than a Bella Twins match. And they're in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
Yeah. But oh my god, she didn't start a reality show. Anyway. Yeah. Like that, it was a thing of ECW didn't really have a women's division. Like they had an amount of it, but it wasn't big enough to be considered a division. So the women just fought the men. And she did really well at it. Like she actually beat up men, and it was believable, and people like she got a good crowd reaction from the ECW crowd for being a legit badass wrestler. So yeah, there you go. Who's your fifth choice?
My fifth choice is another specific year, and it's also 2018.
Mm-hmm.
My pick is Rusev from 2018. Now, I could have gone for Rusev in their entirety, because Rusev's whole run could be summed up in being extremely underrated. Specifically during
Miro and AEW at points too.
Yeah, even in points, yeah.
Mm.
But specifically this, mainly because this was Rusev Day. Rusev. And it's similar. It's very similar to LA Knight now, where it just got over because Rusev is really, really charismatic.
Mm-hmm.
This was during his whole stick with aiding English, which again was also very, very, very over. And in the same Rumble as I mentioned earlier, because the 2018 Rumble is probably my favorite Rumble.
It's one of the best ever. It's one of the best ever.
I think it's my favorite Rumble because it's the personification of like that time for me.
Yeah,
like 2018 was really like sort of.
I'd say I would say the 2018 Men's Rumble is the best Rumble of the modern era.
I'd say so.
Yeah, like in terms of all time,
so.
it's hard to compare because different eras are so wildly, crazily different.
Yeah.
Like the 1992 Royal Rumble and the 2001 Royal Rumble are both excellent in their own ways, but it's a different time. Like, you can't... Comparing the 2018 Rumble to the one where Ric Flair went all the way, or the one where Stone Cold and The Rock were at the end with blood on their faces, it's hard to compare. But in terms of the modern era, the 2018 Rumble is probably the best one.
Yeah. Yeah, like... Such a good Rumble. The only bad part about that Rumble is the Matt Hardy, Bray Wyatt spot. Even then that's for an entrant only, really. Other than that, every other thing in that Rumble match is great. But specifically, Rusev during this time was just so over. The Rusev Day stuff was really great. His like partnership with Eirich English was so entertaining. They had him in a fatal 4-way match at WrestleMania for the US title, and they didn't have him fucking win it. They had Jinder fucking Mahal win it.
Yep.
Which was like in another world, that is fine because Jinder as a mid card champion with that gimmick could work. But Rusev was in the match, and he was one of the most over wrestlers on the show.
It was insult to injury because we'd just come off Jinder's world title reign the previous year. Which also would have been better if Rusev had won that.
Yeah, it would have been fun. But yeah, Rusev Day, like 2018 Rusev is just like so entertaining, being like so charismatic because he is just in general charismatic. Like I mentioned in the last video we did, where in the 2016 Rumble he took a monitor after beating up Roman Reigns and deemed himself TV champion. Such a great little moment. And there were a ton of moments in here, Rusev Day. Like the unveiling of the T-shirt was great. Just any time he came out, everyone chanting Rusev Day and him just like pumping his like pecs and stuff. Like it was so fun. He was just so fun, and it deserved a lot more because it was such a great gimmick. Imagine all the great comedy stuff you could do with that gimmick and heel wrestlers.
Babyface Rusev would have been amazing. Amazing.
Yeah.
And he's a fantastic athlete as well. Fun. He's a great athlete.
Yeah, he's got a great look. He really does.
Yep.
He's just a mountain of a man.
And any promo he's done as the Redeemer in AEW has been so damn awesome. Like the whole story, the feud he had with God. The way he's like, I am God's favorite champion, and my wife has flexible legs. I loved his run with the TNT title in 2021. It was so good.
Yeah, so great. It was such a great, strange gimmick that weirdly just got over because Rusev was really charismatic. And Eirich English was a great, second man in that, gimmick.
God, remember,
really fun.
Remember when he came out on a tank at WrestleMania 31?
That was great.
Oh yeah. I was pissed off that they lumped him with the whole Vladimir Putin apologist gimmick because he's not even Russian. He's Bulgarian.
No.
And they did the cringy Cena American because it's about the United States Championship, so it's got to be about patriotism, which is just dumb. I hate that.
Really great stuff. Deserved a lot better.
Yeah. He's also one of those guys that like he got buried quite a few times, and he was always able to recover and get over again and again and again and again and again.
Oh yeah.
Like the League of Nations.
He also got to say shit on live TV.
He did. Like the League of Nations was one of the shittest gimmicks of booking in that time period, and yet he was able to get that over within a couple of years after that. My sixth choice is Dean Malenko. This is often mentioned when it comes to underrated wrestlers. he was one of the radicals, and he's often overshadowed by Eddie and Chris Benoit. Dean Malenko is one of the greatest technical in-ring performers ever. I think the reason why he never really got chosen to be in a main event position or like a big role is because he's not really... He kind of has the Roderick Strong thing that people used to say about Roderick Strong, of like, he doesn't have a personality. Because really, Dean Malenko isn't... He's not really... It's not that he doesn't have charisma, it's just... having, like, talking is not really his thing. His strength is being a wrestler. So, in the sense of, he is popular in the same way the sports player would be popular for their ability to do the sport. And I think it's that, because he doesn't fit in with the sports entertainment world, it's probably why Vince never wanted to give him a big push. At least he didn't get lumped with a mop like Perry Saturn did. But Dean Malenko has been used as an agent a lot, so that at least he got that. But in the 90s, especially in WCW, he was used as a... And I think he also had a run in ECW as well. He put on incredible matches. He's just one of those guys that was able to just put on great match after great match after great match. There's a reason why when Jim Johnston made Antonio Cesaro's theme song, the Miracle theme, it's basically a remix of Dean Malenko's theme, because it's the same thing of, this is the guy on the roster that Vince doesn't look at enough, because he's known for being an in-ring guy as opposed to, you know, someone on the mic, which I'll actually talk about later. But yeah, Malenko is very, 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 very good at wrestling. So yeah, that's why he goes underrated, because he has nothing but great matches, basically. He just happens to not be much of a promo guy. Not that he's a bad talker, it's just not his thing. You know, it's not something that is really part of his thing. But the interesting part of that is Chris Benoit wasn't either. And yet Chris Benoit was given like a world title run. You know? Benoit had... You know, Benoit's appeal was mostly in-ring as well. But I think maybe the difference is that Benoit could actually come across like a real menace, which is kind of a bit chilling to talk about in hindsight. But it just in the context of the time, I think maybe it's more palatable for Vince to book Chris Benoit in a position like that, because Benoit has a natural kind of scary charisma to him, I guess you could say, with like the missing tooth and like the really grueling, you know, submissions and strikes and all that. Whereas Malenko is more of like a technician. He's more of like a grappler as opposed to a hard-hitting wrestler. You know, he's not the kind of wrestler that would beat the shit out of you. He's more of like he's more like Bryan Danielson, but without the Japanese strikes, I guess you could say. Bryan Danielson is a big fan of Dean Malenko. I'll say that. I remember I saw an interview somewhere where Bryan Danielson said, my favorite wrestler growing up was never The Rock, it was Dean Malenko, because Dean Malenko was a wrestler, you know? He's an old school technical wrestler that could do lots of different holds and all that, and was very smooth in the ring. You know, he's one of those guys that everything looked really crisp and clean, and he was able to make wrestling look great. So yeah, which is why he makes for a great coach, actually, and agent, because he's very, very good at laying out matches. But yeah, he just doesn't have like a larger-than-life personality, really. I guess that's the main reason why he goes underrated. Yeah. Anyway, who's your sixth choice?
Ooh, my sixth choice. All right, this is gonna be one that is very niche. I think that not a lot of people are gonna know about. But mine, underrated, my sixth one, is Joseph Connors from WCPW.
Ah, yes, he also competed in the UK tournament for WWE.
He was a part of NXT UK.
Hmm.
Now, this one is a bit more special to me because I watched WCPW a lot during 2016 when it first started, and then for like a year and a half where it was quite a fun indie fed, really. But Joseph Connors, I would say, out of the entire history of WCPW / Defiant, which was rebranded to, Joseph Connors is probably their most, I would say for me, their most iconic world champion. Because Joseph Connors had an amazing theme music, which I'll probably send you it because it is such a banger. He is, if I'm remembering correctly, these timelines, he is what I would say is a Tommaso Ciampa-like character in how he was presented. He had a tag team in WCPW with Joe Hendry, who is, I believe, currently in Impact Wrestling, if I'm getting that right. Which turned into him being mocked in that tag team because Joe Hendry was the music popular guy who made custom music. Eventually that turned Joseph Connors into a psychotic heel who eventually won the world championship. And I remember going to a show in London, which is the first ever pro wrestling show I've ever been to. I've only been to two, and both of them were WCPW shows. And Joseph Connors was on the first one because after that he went to NXT UK. He cut a really good promo, which had him clinging on to the championship like Ciampa did with the NXT Gold, really building onto that sort of psychotic, clingy sort of champion, which I really like as a title reign idea. I think it's a really cool idea to have a wrestler go from winning that championship, but then sort of losing their mind and becoming sort of he describes himself in the promo as a killer. And that sort of champion is a really cool idea that has a lot of potential. And unfortunately, then it wasn't a super long reign, but it was a really memorable reign for me because not only that, on the same show, this was the same show where he had a really good match with Gabriel Kidd, who I believe is big now in New Japan. During this show, he was about to cripple Joe Hendry. But in this show, the lights go out, and then Drew Galloway returns to WCPW and cuts an amazing promo on Joseph Connors. And then they have a really good three-way match at their pay-per-view in a steel cage. This whole reign was so memorable for me, and personally for me is quite memorable because it is a part of the first show I ever went to. And Joseph Connors is a really good promo, a really good wrestler, and I'm annoyed that he never really got a chance to shine in NXT UK. Really, I've not seen anything of just that show in general, not seen much. But Joseph Connors, I feel like, is a wrestler who deserved a bit more. Because I saw live firsthand the sort of potential this guy had. You know? Not talking about WWE world title, but you never know. But he is such a decent wrestler and a great promo, and he will always hold a special place in my heart, being a part of the first show I ever went to. Yeah, I really enjoyed his reign in WCPW and his feud with Joe Hendry. I think he's great. I'm gonna send you his theme because his theme fits the character so well, and it's such a banger as well.
It was the same thing
Joseph
with it was the same thing with Pete Dunne's old theme as well.
Mm.
That old bruiserweight
Who
thing.
was also on that same show. It was him and Travis Banks, who we won't talk about, against Mustache Mountain. And it was so surreal because I remember the end of the show. I look to my right as I'm about to leave, and I see Tyler Bate and Pete Dunne just standing there talking to each other. And now you fast forward to now, they're both, you know, pretty popular, well-known people in WWE, especially Pete Dunne. Like he is obviously in the Brawling Brutes, which is it's just crazy to think about that show had quite a few people who would eventually go on. Like, it had Tyler Bate on it, who, like, a couple months later would be the first ever NXT UK champion.
And obviously
which is fucking crazy.
And obviously Drew Galloway, who we know is Drew McIntyre, who's been...
Drew Galloway on that show, I think, his best ever promo. I don't know if you've ever seen that promo, but it is such a good fucking promo. And I got to see that live, which, again, that show just is so memorable for me. It being the one of two live shows I've ever been to, you know, it was a great show, great night. That was.
I love the promo he cut on Kevin Owens last year on Raw.
Oh yeah, and a very similar. I'll send you the promo that I'm talking about. But yeah, it's very similar to that in the sense of him being so passionate about being like chosen. He talks a lot about in that promo about him being released and how he's having to redefine himself. There's a great line to end the promo where he's like, "I'm Drew Galloway, the personification of professional wrestling, and Joseph Connors, I swear to God, you are fucked."
I think I have seen that clip before.
Yeah, I think it's probably their most famous promo, I would say, and probably one of Galloway's best promos that I've seen.
Yep.
It's so many great moments and like things from that night looking back. You know, so great.
The most noteworthy match I remember that WCPW did in terms of star power was Kurt Angle versus Alberto Del Prick.
Yeah. I was excited when he was there because he'd just been released, and then unfortunately he's a notable. He was known apparently to, as Blompier has said, very much a prick.
Yeah, not surprised.
There's such a lot of great moments from WCPW.
It was an interesting time, wasn't it?
One of their most popular video is on 83 million views because it's Rey Mysterio against Alberto Del Rio.
It's actually insane because obviously a lot of credit goes to a lot of different people, right? It's a lot of different people that credits, but at the heart of it, it is absolutely insane how influential Adam Blompier has been on wrestling since 2015.
Oh yeah,
insane.
It's pretty insane.
And he's arguably
He's
arguably at his peak, doing his best work right now. With
he's
Wrestle Talk Parts Unknown and No Rolls Barred is just it's just this. It's some of my favorite YouTube content I've ever seen.
Yeah, like he I've been to both of the I've been to three, but the last two Wrestle Talk live shows. I've been able to watch the pre-show Quizomania, and it's just such great fun. Honestly, it's always a good time.
He's an incredible, he's an incredible entertainer, and an eye for storytelling. He just gets it.
Oh yeah, he does. Yeah, he. I remember seeing his face. I think I mentioned this on the Money in the Bank video, but I remember seeing his face when John Cena mentioned the possibility of a WrestleMania London. Blompier's face was like that, if everyone could probably imagine it, the wide-eye, mouth-gaping reaction he had. He was like, what? It was so funny.
Yeah. That whole group, that Wrestle Talk family, like, they are some of the best at reacting to things. Like, getting excited about things,
I can hear Luke's like, oh.
Yeah. I love it when I love it when Ollie gets excited because he goes out of being the boss and he just acts like a little kid.
Yeah, I think that. Yeah, definitely. It's great fun.
Ollie seems like the best boss to have, right? He seems like the best boss you'd want to have in a company because he's just so friendly.
Well, yeah, you really see their friendships just come across, which is always fun.
I saw Ollie Davis's first ever Wrestle Talk News in 2014 when he was a lowly replacement for someone else who called in sick. And then he rose to power. And he has arguably taken it to its peak.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. He has made Wrestle Talk possibly the most must-see wrestling YouTube network on the planet at the moment. Especially after signing Adam Blompier, that was huge for them. Absolutely huge. That was in like 2019. That's like 4 years ago now. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Yep. Quizzlemania got me through a lot of the pandemic, I'll say that much. Anyway. Moving on. My seventh choice for an underrated wrestler. This one's a bit sad because this guy is no longer alive. And he passed away via suicide. It's Sean O'Haire. So Sean O'Haire was part of the WCW power plant. He was in that same class as guys like Chuck Palumbo and AJ Styles that were on the rise near the end of WCW right before it got bought. And so he never really got the time to shine, especially because he came in during WCW when its booking was at its absolute messiest during the Vince Russo era. And everyone stopped watching the product because it was just so unbearably bad, like with David Arquette winning the world title and all that crap. Oh, Jesus. And all the fucking Jeff Jarrett reigns that were just unnecessary. But Sean O'Haire came in through that, and immediately this guy stood out. I mean, obviously someone like an AJ Styles was the most standout, especially once he got to TNA with the whole X division. But Sean O'Haire was noticeably very tall, but also noticeably very, very athletic for his size. And he had a unique look, and he could cut great promos. And so, obviously, WCW got bought. And this is the thing that sucks the most about it, is that because of the way that Vince, unfortunately, the Invasion storyline got bungled, because they couldn't sign WCW's main event talents because the contracts hadn't expired yet. So guys like the NWO, like Hogan, Nash and Hall, Goldberg, and then they could have tried to sign Sting, but he went to TNA instead, eventually. And, you know, you didn't have a lot of the major names from WCW. And so the Invasion angle, a lot of the guys that were featured on it weren't the top guys, and you had people like Sean O'Haire, who was a relatively unknown name, positioned as being important, but because he hasn't been an established star, when you line him up against the people like, you know, Stone Cold, Triple H, The Rock, Jericho, Benoit, Eddie, like, he just doesn't compare. You know, like Kurt Angle, for example. And so, yeah, it's really, 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 really hard to shine when you're expected to carry something that wasn't even something for you to carry in the first place. Because Sean O'Haire was not really established in WCW that much. He was just there for a bit until it closed. And then shortly after that, they started airing these vignettes. I think it was in like 2003. This was after the first brand split, where he was doing this devil's advocate character, and I think this is probably the most famous run of his career, where he was cutting these promos where he was saying things like, you know, almost indulging in your biggest temptations, and like saying like, oh, you know, he's saying like, oh, you know, you can cheat on your wife, she won't find out, but I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. And he like wore this suit in these promos against like a white background. and he would like almost say these things like he's like tempting the audience, and they were really compelling vignettes. And then eventually they just dropped them. They dropped the whole character entirely after a bit, and then they paired him with Roddy Piper, and Piper was not. He was misbehaving at the time, because Piper is a bit of a loose cannon, and it kind of just damaged Sean O'Haire because he was involved in everything to do with it. And then his career just kind of fizzled out and he got released. And then eventually, unfortunately, his life spiraled. You know, he lost a lot of things in his life, and then he eventually ended up losing his life altogether. And it's so sad. And he is so underrated because he's almost like he's one of those guys where it's like a what if because of his potential. Because he had it all. He had a great, unique look. He was tall, massive, but also super athletic in the ring. Like, he could do really athletic stuff. A bit like, maybe not quite as jacked, but it's kind of like Wardlow in the sense that he is a really big guy that could do a lot of athletic stuff. And he had a great look, and he was great with promos, really convincing. And for some reason, because of all the booking, it just didn't work out. And the timing was off. The way he came in and the storylines he had to be a part of, the timing was just so off for him. But as a talent, he goes so underrated. By the company and by fans, I think. Because he doesn't get enough praise, I think, for his talent. Despite all the really shoddy booking around him. So yeah. That's why my number 7 is Sean O'Haire. Rest in peace. What's your number 7?
My number 7 was someone I actually hinted at in my last one. Is Joe Hendry, also from WCPW.
Mm.
And I sort of hinted at it. He was a great he was great, again, another comedy wrestler, but also someone who could be very serious when he needed to. Joe Hendry, I remember at the time, was making a lot of parody music video Titantrons based on popular songs at the time. The one I referenced earlier was a tag one with him and Joseph Connors to the theme of what's the name? The Raw theme. Fucking God, I can't remember the name of it. Across the nation, I can't remember what it's fucking called.
Oh yeah.
Fucking music, yeah.
Yeah. That's across the nation.
I remember it. Yeah, and it went like Joe Hendry's music, yeah, his fucking music, yeah, fucking music, yeah, and Joseph Connors, I need to send you that as well. It was so fucking funny. Yeah, but he was also a really good fucking wrestler. He was sort of one of the main guys. Him, Martin Kirby, Joseph Connors for a bit were sort of the main guys from WCPW around that time who were there for the entirety of its lifespan.
Mm.
And yeah, Joe Hendry was so great. He had a group called the Prestige for a little bit in a heel run, which was kind of cool. Had a couple problematic people in it, but he was great. He was always great, always a great wrestler, great promo. Wish he was in more, I wish he was on he could have gone to NXT by now and been super over, honestly. But as of now, I believe he is in Impact, if I'm remembering rightly. I know he's been in Impact recently. He's obviously a Scottish wrestler. But right now, yeah, I think he is in Impact. Doing some good stuff there, I'd imagine. Hopefully at some point he can maybe come to WWE or AEW. I think AEW would actually be a good fit with him, in that same sort of MJF mold of being a great promo guy, but also a really good wrestler. But yeah, if you haven't seen any Joe Hendry stuff, you definitely should check it out because it's really entertaining stuff. He's got a great look as well, a really good look that I think, he should be up there for me. Yeah, so that little dual package of Joseph Connors and Joe Hendry, you know, really nostalgic for that sort of time period in 2016.
Yeah, WCPW was a magical time. A YouTube channel made a wrestling promotion. It's crazy.
Yeah. Really good time.
Man, Rey Mysterio wrestled in WCW. WCW,
Yeah,
I should say.
Cody Rhodes. I got to see Cody Rhodes face Matt Riddle live.
That's crazy.
I got to see that live. That's fucking insane. And that Cody is like the most over person on Raw right now.
Yeah, he main evented WrestleMania.
This year, yeah.
Yeah.
And that was the first time I ever saw like Matt Riddle. I'd never heard of him before that match. But it was a really good fucking match. It was a great hardcore match. And that was during, if I remember correctly, that was when he was internet champion, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, Matt Riddle.
I got to. Yeah.
Matt Riddle was an MMA fighter, and he really quickly transitioned to wrestling, and he just instantly got it. It's a bit like Kurt Angle, how he just instantly got it.
Yeah, it was. I remember that match being really good, really fun, hardcore match.
Yep. All right, are we ready for my number 8? My 8th choice.
Yeah.
So my number 8 is a legend, and he is recognized as a legend in the business, but I think he deserves to be even higher in the hierarchy of legends in the business. It is Christian Cage. He is one of the most underrated legends in wrestling history, right? Because he is recognized as having a great career and people remember him, but he is so good at everything. He has some of the best footwork in wrestling. Any professional will tell you that. His ability to position himself and to make any opponent compatible with him. His in-ring psychology is second to none. His attention to detail is second to none. His ability to adapt to so many different match types is great. Like he can do crazy like TLC spot fest, but then he could also do like a technical match, but then he could also do like a sports entertainment comedy match. He can do anything. He has some of the best like the way he connects with the crowd in his entrance, and like the way he chooses his entrance musics as well throughout his career has been really well placed for all the gimmicks he's done. Like he has this ability to, he can be a really goofy character, but then he can also be a really serious character as well. He can be a really funny, goofy, fun, like really dry, humid baby face. And like when he won the World Heavyweight Championship in 2011 after Edge retired, he had the whole audience cheering when he climbed the ladder to win the belt. At the same time, he can also be an absolutely massively bastard heel like he is currently in AEW, where he has no redeeming qualities and he's just a hateable person through and through. He is so underrated as a promo. The way he's able to make the crowd hang on his every word. And he's so funny. The way he, like, in his feud with Jungle Boy, like, when he went up to Jungle Boy's mom, he's like, "You raised a piece of shit! You raised a piece of shit!
Your son's a piece of shit! You raised a piece of shit!"
But then, like, you go to some of the comedy stuff he did with Edge back in the Attitude Era is so funny as well. And the comedy he did with Jericho as well, and after that. Man, and then in 2005, this was the peak of his career. When he had that theme song by Waterproof Blonde, the original Just Close Your Eyes, if you close your, like the original version of that, and he was feuding with John Cena on Raw, and he was basically doing his lame Canadian version of Thugonomics, and it was hilarious. And all the people all of the smart marks wanted him to beat Cena for the belt. Obviously, that didn't happen. So after that, he went to TNA and won the NWA World Heavyweight Championship, and he had a fantastic run there. Like, he is genuinely, I think, one of the most talented people to ever touch the business. And I'm so happy that in 2021 he got to main event a major pay-per-view for 3 different companies, because he was in the Royal Rumble match at the Royal Rumble, he was in the main event of Bound for Glory for Impact, and he was in the main event of All Out for AEW. Yeah, Christian he's a master storyteller, and he's just good at everything. And he's so underrated, and it's because the classic reason is because Vince always preferred Edge. Because Edge is the biggest star, you know, he's the more charismatic, you know, larger than life sort of big match wrestler. Like Edge has that main eventer thing about him that is so naturally charismatic. But Christian Cage deserves credit as well, because this might be a bit of a hot take. I actually think Christian Cage is a better in-ring performer than Edge ever was. That's not to discredit Edge, because Edge is also great, but I actually think Christian's a better wrestler than Edge. It's just that Edge has a much more vibrant personality, and that makes him a bigger star by default. But yeah, Christian Cage is so underrated when it comes to like the legends of the business, and I think he will get his credit once he's retired and once he gets into the Hall of Fame. I know he will. But the
whole meme of him talking about dead dads on every post I see of him on Twitter, it's just so fucking funny to think about.
Yeah,
like Nick Wayne didn't win the Battle Royal, but the amount of tweets I saw of like seeing like Nick Wayne was in the match and then a picture of Christian, so you can read like instantly about it, and it's like, fucking hell, he's not infamous for that type of promo.
Yeah,
because dead dads.
Because it's Nick Wayne's a young wrestler with a dead dad and a hot MILF mum.
Yeah.
And Christian Cage.
Sweet on Christian Cage, if you know what I mean.
And also the fact that Luchasaurus is the TNT champion, but Christian holds the belt.
Oh, it's such a good idea. It's such a fun idea. That's so good.
Oh, his heel run in AEW has been nothing but brilliant. He's so good.
Yeah, it's been really good. Such a good promo.
And he's like nearly 50 years old, but he had a ladder match with Wardlow at Double or Nothing that was fantastic.
Yeah, he looks great.
Yeah, he's excellent. And I remember him and Edge used to do a podcast, and Christian was so funny. Yeah, he is the most subtle, get under your skin sense of humor, and just like he could just make Edge laugh at any point he wants to. Oh yeah, he has such great comedic timing, but he also has such great control. Like he's able to stop himself from laughing, which makes it even funnier because he's so dry. I remember watching that match on SmackDown, like literally days after he won the world title, and he lost it to Randy Orton immediately. I was pissed off. I was so angry. But then he had that run. They continued the feud, and then he turned heel, and he did like the whole one more match gimmick. Yeah, and he was in the Brood as well. That was also a other part of his career, was when he was at the Brood with Gangrel and Edge, and he was a vampire. Yeah. Christian Cage is one of the most underrated legends in wrestling. And he's still going, and he's still great. I kind of find it funny how like his feud with Jungle Boy was supposed to make Jungle Boy a star, but it actually made Christian Cage an even bigger legend. That's what happened. That feud has just made Christian Cage even better than he already was.
Number 8 is another one from AEW.
Mm-hmm.
The Bastard Pac.
Also known as Adrian Neville.
Yeah. He deserved better than fucking what he got. Bloody hell. Losing to Enzo Amore, fucking hell. Just for the fact that he is such an awesome wrestler with such a great look, he just should be in more title programs. He just should be. Like, he's one of the best wrestlers on the planet. He's also great Englishman, great Geordie. He's so funny.
I loved it when he returned recently and he's like, Kenneth!
Yeah. I don't know if you've seen his promo after the Blood and Guts match, but he cuts a promo on Claudio, and at the end of it, he says, "Oh, and just so you know, Blackpool's a shithole."
He is that such
so fucking great.
He's got like that blunt way of speaking, like from the Geordie streets.
Yeah. Weird. Blackpool's a shithole. Oh, so fucking good. But yeah, he is a great high flyer who's also, when he came up to the main roster for the first time, and he was great. He had a great match with Seth Rollins, but after that, he never really picked up after that. They made him dress as an elf at Christmas, which was fucking stupid. But then they turned him heel, and it was great. They instantly made him Cruiserweight champion. He had a great title reign, great matches, and they fucking ended with Enzo Amore for no reason. Then he left. And now he's gone on to be a great wrestler, in other companies, put on great matches. But he honestly should be world champion. He's that fucking good.
Yeah, I think the issue with him is the intermittent schedule he has.
Mm-hmm.
They made him All Atlantic champion, but again they changed. They made it. So they changed it to the international title and gave it to Orange Cassidy.
Yeah, who's having a great title reign.
Yeah, he is. But yeah, your Packers. I think it's just the whole thing of his schedule. It limits what they can do booking wise, but I guess in a way it kind of makes him more like a special attraction because you don't see him all the time.
But it never really feels like that because it's not booked a way where I'm always happy to see him and I want him to be pushed better. I never feel like it's like, oh, what a great title program, what a great feud, what a great build up to this match. Because you're excited for a Puck match because it's Puck. Yeah. You're excited because it's him and probably another great wrestler. It's never to do with the fact that it's a great build up to a match. The most you could probably say is probably his match with Kenny and Orange Cassidy. That's the most he's gotten out of like a main title feud. Obviously, he just had a match with Claudio, but
he did.
And that was a replacement match.
This did happen as a consequence of the brawl out thing, but he did have a good trios run with the Lucha Brothers, the Death Triangle trio.
Yeah. Death Triangle has always been strange to me because it just doesn't feel like it's a group that should exist. Like, obviously, the Lucha Bros are great, but it feels like Pac is better served on his own or in a group like the Combat Club. Yeah. Of that same kind of mold, where that would suit him a lot better. Death Triangle has always felt like a weird mismatch. Even though they put on great matches, it never really feels like they blend together as characters.
Well, yeah, the whole thing with Death Triangle is that character-wise they don't mix, but it's just a really good idea to have them in the ring together, really, is the whole reason they do
definitely, because they're all great wrestlers. But it never feels like they've ever given us a reason of these are great units of characters who put on great matches and great feuds. Like, their feud with fucking House of Black went on for so fucking long.
Yeah, that's true. I think that was because of an injury or something. I can't remember.
Yeah, it was.
Oh, yeah, because of Ray Phoenix.
Yeah, because he broke his arm, unfortunately. But if that's what happens, that's what happens. Don't just dawdle along.
I would love if at the next Forbidden Door they do Pac versus Will Ospreay.
That would be great. That would be a fucking great match.
And if he ever went back to WWE with Triple H booking, I'd love to see Pac versus Ricochet on a pay-per-view. I really liked his run with the NXT title when he was Adrian Neville. He had a really good feud with Tyson Kidd, I remember. And then he obviously had the feud with Sami Zayn as well. Speaking of NXT, my number 9 is Dominik Dijakovic, also known as Donovan Dijak, also known as T-Bar in Retribution. Yeah, so again, this guy is one of the most unique athletes I've ever seen in wrestling. Obviously, his most famous feuds. He had 2 feuds with Keith Lee. One of them was in PWG, and then they did it again in NXT Black and Gold. He is so tall, yet he wrestles like a high flyer, and it's just like the things he does look impossible, but he does them with effortless ability. And he's a really good in-ring storyteller as well. Like, he's able to really... He's a really good babyface. And he can also play a good heel too. But I remember when... During the pandemic... they were building up to Keith Lee and Karrion Kross. And so Dijakovic, because he had earned the respect of... Him and Keith Lee had earned the respect of each other after their match in Portland, which is a fucking incredible match if anyone wants to see that. I think it's on YouTube for free. Keith Lee and Dijakovic in Portland is unbelievable. But they'd earned each other's respect. And there's a match where Karrion Kross chokes out Dijakovic right in front of Keith Lee. And he's just like, watch your friend pass out right in front of you. Dijakovic is just so good at making you... It's not quite unlike the level of, say, like an Eddie Kingston, for example, but he has an ability to make people care about his matches, as well as being such a unique athlete. The fact that he is so tall and so strong and powerful, and yet he can also do insane high-flying moves as well. Like, he is one of the most dynamic in-ring performers, and he has a great look. Like, recently in NXT, he's gone with the black sunglasses and the jacket, and he looks like an intimidating wrestler. Like, he has a look, and yet for some reason, he spent a bulk of his run on the main roster. Firstly, he was in Retribution as T-Bar, which was just garbage, and then he was on Main Event for most of his time. He was having, like, the best match on Main Event every week, and they'll post clips to Twitter of his matches, and we're just like, why is this guy not on TV? He's so damn good. But yeah, no, Dijak is just like, he is one of the most unique athletes the WWE has ever had, and I feel like he deserves way better than he's gotten. I just don't think Vince understood what to do with this guy in the same way that he was utilized in NXT Black and Gold. Because, man, going from... Literally in the same year, it was 2020, going from that feud with Keith Lee to T-Bar was just such a step down for this guy. And, like, when he became T-Bar, they stopped him from doing all of the cool shit he used to do as Dijakovic. So, yeah. I definitely think he's one of the most underrated wrestlers in WWE, for sure. For sure. Anyone who wants to know exactly what I'm talking about, just go watch any of his matches with Keith Lee, either from the Battle of Los Angeles and PWG, or the match he had at NXT TakeOver with him. It is a spectacle to witness these absolutely mammothly sized men do basically like a cruiserweight match.
Another one from NXT. Kyle O'Reilly.
Oh, yes. Great choice.
Mainly because during that run with the tag titles, he was so fucking entertaining. His ability to put in that extra bit of character and, like, charm to his selling is always something I remember the most from his matches in the Undisputed Era. I remember one sell he did when he got suplexed by one of the Authors of Pain. He gets up, does the power-up spot, and then crumbles and falls out of the ring. And it's so fucking funny. It's so great. Anytime, like, another time he gets, like, he dodges, like, a suplex or something, he's sitting down with a smug look on his face and then get kicked in the head. It's so fucking good. He's, like, the master of that. But he's also a really good promo and a great wrestler, and they built his feud with Cole really well. And they had a really good match, you know, during the pandemic. And he was built up really great. And I think he is sorely missed, I think, from AEW. Because he is a guy that can absolutely be built as a top guy, because he's got all the assets to, as in his game.
Unfortunately, his AEW run was only about 6 months because he had to have neck surgery, and he looks like it could be career ending, which is really sad. But when he was in AEW, Tony Khan loved to book Kyle O'Reilly. when he went because when the Undisputed Elite storyline kind of fizzled out a bit, unfortunately, but when he went singles and he was in the Owen Hart tournament, the match he had with Rey Fenix was incredible, and then later at Double or Nothing, the match he had with Darby Allin was so good. It was such a good match. But he's a great wrestler because he has that martial arts style to him. Like, he does a lot of kicks, but he's also a fantastic storyteller and a great facial reactor. I think the thing that killed Kyle O'Reilly's long-term story at NXT was the fact that Vince decided to rebrand NXT as NXT 2.0. Because number one, and I know this for a fact, the original plan was that undefeated NXT champ Karrion Kross was going to lose the title to Kyle O'Reilly at the end of that year. That was going to be his star-making moment. He was going to win the NXT championship from Kross. But of course, Vince had other ideas. He had Kross lose to Jeff Hardy in like 2 minutes on Raw, which was stupid. And then they had to end the TakeOver era really early because of the rebrand, so they had him lose it to Samoa Joe instead. And then they repackaged him as Cool Kyle, which was just cringe, and they had him tag team with Von Wagner. It's kind of despicable what Vince did to Kyle, because he's one of the best in the world, and it sucks that injury has taken him out of action. And you know, I think it was yesterday I saw someone ask Sean Ross Sapp like any updates on Kyle O'Reilly, and he says he's still out and doesn't look like he's going to be returning anytime soon. And that sucks because he's been away for like a year now. And yeah, I hate it because I love Kyle O'Reilly and I wish he was still around.
Definitely.
Yeah,
it's just a big shame because he's great. Really is.
And it sucks for Bobby Fish because his career's gone down the toilet ever since Kyle got injured.
No. Yeah, where's the lie?
Where's the lie? Also, Kyle O'Reilly is a fan of Pink Floyd, and I endorse that. We wish him the speediest of recoveries, because he deserves to be featured on TV wrestling, because he's great. He's great at wrestling. He's great at everything. Did you know that he's a diabetic and he has to have an insulin test before every match?
No, I did not know that.
Yep. And if his insulin isn't correct, he can't wrestle. And that was one of the main reasons why he was comfortable signing with AEW, because Tony Khan said he would accommodate that. Yeah, like he has like serious type 1 diabetes, where it's like, it's not just like, oh, you take a jab if you've had too much sugar. Like, this is like a thing of like, if his insulin isn't correct, he could die. It's like that bad. So he has to be very strict with his diet. But yeah, I hope he's doing well with his recovery, because his injury was nasty. The neck surgery he had to have, and it happened around the same time that Cole had those concussions. And it sucks because we never got the Elite versus the Undisputed Era, which would have been amazing. Because that was like the whole Wednesday Night War from like 2019 to 2021 was the Undisputed Era on NXT and the Elite on AEW. And that match could have been amazing. I mean, if Kyle O'Reilly ever comes back from injury, they could do it with Roderick Strong, because they've got everyone else there. They've got Kenny and the Bucks, and they've got Adam Cole back, and Roddy Strong's there. If they really want to do it properly, they could have it be Kenny, the Bucks, and Hangman Page, and they bring in Bobby Fish for one match. My 10th choice, speaking of NXT, obviously not NXT anymore, but a long time ago, this man was in NXT. It is Chad Gable.
Snap!
There you go. He's on your list too.
Yeah, not surprising.
Yeah. I mean, ever since he debuted in NXT in 2014, everyone has made comparisons to Kurt Angle. And there's a reason for that, because he is very similar to Kurt Angle in a lot of ways. He's an accomplished amateur wrestler. He's a phenomenal athlete, like an absolutely incredible athlete. His matches are awesome. he seems to never, like, I don't think I've ever seen him botch a move, honestly. I don't think I've ever seen him fuck anything up. Like, this guy is so good. This guy is, like, flawless in the ring. And he's entertaining. He can do the Kurt Angle thing that they compare him to, of, like, he's a really, really funny guy. But in terms of as an athlete, I actually take him seriously because he's an actual legit athlete.
Definitely.
I think at the moment, I really like what they've been doing with him and Otis and Maxine Dupree. That's been really entertaining. But I think for me, the run that really cements Chad Gable is American Alpha in NXT. That was so... That feud with American Alpha and the Revival made tag team wrestling the best I'd ever seen it for a long time. For a long, long time, tag team wrestling hadn't been that good in WWE. Arguably since, like, the mid-2000s, maybe even longer than that. But yeah, Chad Gable is incredible talent. He's a fantastic pro wrestler, and he's a fantastic sports entertainer. And it sucks that, like, Vince gave him the whole Shorty G gimmick, because it's just dumb. And he deserves so much better than that. And why did they make Jason Jordan Kurt Angle's son when Chad Gable is clearly the proper choice for that? If there was going to be someone who's Kurt Angle's son, if there's someone that was going to be Kurt Angle's son, it was going to be Chad Gable, not Jason Jordan.
So strange.
Yeah. But yeah.
Yeah.
Gable's
pretty
great.
much same reason as you. I think he's a great wrestler, great character, great promo, great comedy wrestler when he needs to be, but also very serious. He can absolutely pull that off. We've rewatched his match against the Revival with Jason Jordan, and that match is very fucking good. At Dallas, what a match that is! Great stuff.
The 2 out of 3 falls match, I think it was at Takeover the End. Fucking incredible. I love that match.
Yeah.
And
yeah, he's just a great wrestler that should be pushed, really.
I remember in 2015, they had a match with DIY when they were brand new. And it was like everyone was like, holy shit. Like, it was a match that got all 4 guys over all at once. Chad Gable, Jason Jordan, Johnny Gargano, and Tommaso Ciampa, who at the time in 2015 were just establishing themselves in NXT. But they all got over at the same time. It was amazing. Yeah. Anyway, you continue.
Yeah. It just... such a great wrestler that should be pushed. And all the stuff he's doing right now is super good. Really good fun. Yeah. He should be pushed more. I don't think he's ever had a mid-card title, really.
No.
And that's a massive missed opportunity.
I mean, he is, understandably, he is utilized mostly as a tag team wrestler because he is a fantastic tag team wrestler. He's so good. My
11th choice is Cesaro from 2015. 2015, more specifically. Well, / 16. Yeah.
I'm gonna snap, but it's his whole run for me, like all of it.
Yeah. Mainly because that run in like 2015, and then he got injured, and then 2016 when he came back, that sort of mini run. The Cesaro section was so over. Like, just naturally, because everyone really likes Cesaro because he's a good fucking wrestler. But those like months during 2015 where he slowly got more popular and got more over, and he had a whole Cesaro section, like the first of it, that sort of like kind. It was so fun, and he had a great matches. He had a decent run in the tournament when Seth got injured, but then himself got injured, which was a really big shame. And then he had a great return in the Raw after WrestleMania, and the pop was insane. And then he had a really great Fatal 4-Way match for the IC title at Extreme Rules, which was great. But after that, he just didn't really recover until like the bar stuff, because bar stuff was great in 2016, leading into 17, and then they were just a great tag team, you know. And then he had a really good match with Seth at WrestleMania.
Mm.
And then he had a great match with Roman, and then did nothing, and then got released. It's a shame, real big shame, because Cesaro was like such a good wrestler, and there were moments where, even though he's not the best of promos, his small details of character are pretty great. You know, he can really pull that stuff off.
I mean,
and he's a big shit.
Apparently his promos in Swiss and in German are really good. And remember, it
wouldn't have surprised me.
That was his opening gimmick when he came out with Oksana. Was he would do promos in 5 different languages.
Yeah.
In English, German, Swiss, Italian, and I can't remember what the other one was. Maybe like French or something like that. But yeah, he has been one of the best wrestlers in the world since the ROH days. He's also one of the best tag team wrestlers in the world. His tag team with Chris Hero, his tag team with Tyson Kidd, his tag team with Sheamus, his tag team with Jack Swagger. Again, another person that got you to care about Jack Swagger. And like I remember specifically because the infamous Vince McMahon on the Stone Cold podcast talking about Cesaro is just like, well, he's got the physical capabilities, but he just doesn't have that something about him. Doesn't have the verbal skills. He's not reaching for the brass ring. And then he had that match with John Cena that everyone always puts clips on Twitter from, where he, instead of like pulling the fingers at him, he pulls the ring fingers at him, and he used to tape his fingers to be like, I'm reaching the brass ring. But there was just this run of matches he had from like near I think it was when, because he was on the main roster and he had like that US title reign after he beat Santino, and he had the Real Americans run, but he stayed in NXT and he had that feud with Sami Zayn that everyone always remembers. He had 2 matches with Sami Zayn that were really, really well regarded, and then he also had William Regal's retirement match as well, which was also really well regarded. But there was just a point in time when everyone started to realize, holy shit, this guy is one of the best wrestlers in the world. Every match he has, he is an absolute stud. And then like in 2013, when he started doing the Cesaro swing, and I remember it was Battleground 2013. It was the same pay-per-view when Cody and Goldust beat the Shield. He did the swing to the Great Khali, and everyone was just like, what the fuck? And he like pinned the Great Khali afterwards. And then I remember he was in the Elimination Chamber in 2014, and he was like the star of the match. And then he won the Andre the Giant Battle Royal at WrestleMania 30. It's just a shame, because when they paired him with Paul Heyman, that just kind of killed him for a bit. But then he rose again, like as he always does, and he just had great match after great match after great match after great match. And like you said, the bar was great. He was just consistently, throughout his time in Ring of Honor and his 9 years on the main roster in WWE, he would consistently have great matches every single week he would wrestle. Just outstanding physical performances, and he has in-ring charisma as well. Do you remember when he ran into the crowd and ripped the beach ball up? That was so funny.
It's the most. It's everywhere.
Yeah,
it's one of those like 7 things that's always on Twitter. Like the 2009 roster is stacked. The Karrion Kross Adam Cole promo.
Yeah,
is
that's
that
right.
kind of stuff.
Yeah,
that's always
when he
the Miz talking some Mac promo. Yeah,
exactly. And they always show clips of Cesaro in that multi-tag match when he goes around doing all those moves to all those people. Like he does that big, the big stomp and then the uppercut. Man, I remember when the Cena Open Challenge match that Cesaro did, and like when he did that springboard uppercut, he literally pushed Cena, who's a fucking big chunky guy. He like pushed him so far into the air. This is insane levels of athleticism, and it's not until finally in AEW with the Blackpool Combat Club, he is finally getting featured in the way he should, with his long reign as the ROH World Champion. And he has been... Tony Khan gets it. He understands Claudio. He understands the kind of talent this guy is. And he has actually gotten chance to show what he can do as a promo, because he is charismatic and he can talk. It's just not in the way that Vince McMahon wants. Because Vince McMahon thinks of promos in a very different way to the way Cesaro cuts promos. Because as a character, the way he speaks on the microphone, it reminds me more of like a sports interview than like a cheesy promo character with like scripted lines. Cesaro is not the kind of guy that needs scripted lines. He's a guy who does like a kind of sports like interview, and he can naturally just say things and give off the right energy. Like if you see him in any of the press, like the media scrums after the pay-per-views, when he's, especially the ROH ones, he just has this natural way of speaking with an audience that is so compelling. And as I've already said, he's one of the best athletes I've ever seen in wrestling. Ever. Ever. He is one of the strongest I've ever seen, but he can also do a lot of really, really acrobatic stuff as well. And he has never not been in shape. Every single match I've ever seen him have, he's been absolutely ripped.
Oh yeah, he's massively ripped.
Yeah. He's one of those guys, like, he doesn't take a taxi to the airport. Like, he wakes up at 5 in the morning and walks to the airport, because that's just the kind of person he is. Yeah. And he's got that really unique European sense of humor as well, which just adds a whole different dynamic to it. Yeah, he's so good. He is such a charming wrestler, you know. So, and like, you know, for many years during his run in WWE, everyone's like, he is the most underrated wrestler on the roster by far. Everyone used to say that. And Vince just couldn't see what we saw in him. Because he doesn't really fit Vince's idea of sports entertainment. At least as a character, he doesn't. Like, in the ring, obviously Vince respected him in the ring for his athletic abilities. Like, I remember he was just like, oh, physically, my God. But yeah, and, you know, Cesaro just has such a memorable and fun moveset as well. You think about all the stuff he does, like the big stomp, the swing, the neutralizer, the springboard uppercut, the catapult uppercut. He even like will pull out these. Oh, I remember he used to do this thing where he would stand on the second rope, and the person would be on the apron, and he would superplex them from below and above his head. It was just like insane levels of strength. Yeah. And I think one of his most underrated runs that unfortunately got cut short was his tag team with Tyson Kidd. I fucking loved that run so much.
That was a really good run, and it's a shame.
That's another guy. I didn't put him on the list, but Tyson Kidd is easily one of the most underrated wrestlers, I think, out there. I think it's if his career wasn't cut so short, maybe he'd be more of a contender. But Tyson Kidd always was underrated. Like, those two guys were like the most underrated during that time. Because the in-ring just ability to create great matches is just endless. And again, his tag team with Jack Swagger, he made Jack Swagger actually appealing in the ring. Like, Zeb Coulter made Jack Swagger an appealing character with his promos, and then the tag team with Cesaro made the matches really cool to watch as well. Because Cesaro, because he's such a great tag team wrestler, he's great at understanding his partner's moveset and then interacting with it, like combining moves together. Because it was the same thing with Chris Hero in Ring of Honor, and it was the same thing with Sheamus in the bar, and it's the same thing in the Blackpool Combat Club tag team matches as well. Yeah. Claudio / Cesaro is just incredible. So underrated. Not underrated by the fans, but underrated by Vince McMahon, specifically. Suppose that leads me to my 12th choice then.
Yes.
So my 12th choice is another legend in the business, and unfortunately another one that passed away way too early. It's Brian Pillman. And this one sucks because he died in his prime in 1997, like right when he was really, really in the middle of some of the best stuff of his career. But Brian Pillman is genuinely one of the most captivating talents I think the business has ever had. Especially his run in ECW. The promos he cut in ECW were insane. Like, he is the definition of unhinged. And he made for a great, like, high-flying wrestler in WCW as well. Like, his run in WCW was great. But once he became the loose cannon in ECW and he did those crazy segments, like when there's this segment where he was, like, wrestling a giant pencil, and it's just so crazy. And then you get to 1996, where he has the feud with Stone Cold Steve Austin, where you get the infamous Raw segment where Stone Cold breaks into his house and he points a gun at him. Brian Pillman is one of the guys that really ushered in the Attitude Era in WWE. Right in the heat of it in 1997, he was part of the Hart Foundation stable when they did the whole Canadian Stampede pay-per-view, which is one of the pay-per-views that has some of the best crowd reactions. But yeah, Brian Pillman was amazing, and then in 1997 he passed away really suddenly. And it sucks because he was so good. He was a fantastic wrestler and an incredible character and incredible promos, and just, if anyone wants to see him like in his peak, go watch his, I think it might be his debut in ECW. He does this unhinged work shoot in ECW, which is just, it's like frightening to watch. And he swears a lot in it. But like the way he's able to make you believe like he's actually invaded this company and he's terrorizing it is just, it's incredible. He's so talented. And it's such a shame that he was lost so soon. But yeah, Brian Pillman is one of the greats. Fantastic, so underrated.
My 12th choice is another member of Damage Control. My pick is Dakota Kai.
Yes, Dakota Kai, who is from the same city that I am from.
Yeah, mainly because Dakota Kai is really cool. Dakota Kai is a really cool person. I first knew about Dakota Kai from, I believe, the fucking what was the tournament called?
Oh, the Mae Young Classic.
Mae Young Classic, yes. But then I found out that she was also friends with like New Legacy, and I remember watching videos of her playing GTA with them, and she just seems like a really fucking cool person.
Yeah, she
just seems like a really, really cool person.
She's like the female Adam Cole in that sense. The female Chugs. Just the fun gamer.
Her never-ending feud with Johnny will fuel me to the day I die. It's just his hatred for Dakota.
With the big dog.
So fucking funny. Big dog.
She could technically make a claim to be part of the bloodline because she is Samoan.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I remember seeing a clip of like someone brought a sign of like John Blood fears toilets or John Blood sucks, and her responding to that is so fucking funny.
Yeah.
It's so great. But also Dakota Kai is like a really good wrestler. She's very great in the ring. She's a really good promo. And like out of the three of like Damage Control, she's obviously, I feel like she's always seen as like the third wheel when really I think she's like great, and she also deserves like a singles push because she's great. It's the same she's injured right now.
Did you know that she is 35 years old?
I didn't realize she was that like that old. She looks great for 35.
Mm. Yeah, it's. I mean, to be fair,
I thought she was in her 20s. I thought she was in her 20s.
It's the she's been around for ages. She was in.
Yeah.
We have a promotion called IPW, Impact Pro Wrestling in New Zealand, and she was at Impact Pro Wrestling for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Not to be confused with Impact Wrestling, not TNA.
Yeah.
Impact Wrestling. Yeah, she used to compete at those Armageddon shows that I was talking about before. In fact, I slightly personal, but I briefly dated someone who knows her well. Like she was like good friends with Dakota Kai when she was still in New Zealand. But yeah, and she had a she had a run in NXT, firstly as a babyface and then as a heel.
Yeah, she was famously in the promo package of her arm getting just stomped on by Shayna Baszler. I feel like around that time, that's what she was known for.
Yeah,
just that clip of.
She was one of the redeeming things about the start of NXT 2.0.
She's got a great look. Like she's always got great looks. She's a great promo, really good in the ring, a unique move set. You know, when she came back at SummerSlam, I was so fucking happy for her. I was so happy because I think she's such a great person, you know. And I wish her a speedy recovery, and I hope she comes back stronger because she's great and deserves a great push. It's always great seeing her because I legit mainly know her from like anything from like New Legacy. You know, that's mainly what I know her from.
I wouldn't be surprised if she didn't get rehired by WWE. Like let's say Vince was still in charge and she was still not in the company. She probably would be like the Deadlock World Champion by now.
Oh yeah, she absolutely fucking would, and Johnny would fucking hate it. It'd be fucking great.
Yeah,
that's true. That's very fucking true. There's that. I didn't think about that. Yeah, so there's that world. If something happens, if she's released, she shouldn't be because she's fucking great. If she isn't, the guy should absolutely bring into Deadlock and have a be world champion, and Johnny fucking hate it.
Imagine
so
the pop she would get. You know that she does that like that kick move in the corner. Imagine if she did that to Johnny. Imagine the pop she would get.
No, imagine she did the overdrive. If she did the fucking overdrive.
Oh my god, that's dangerous as fuck.
The worst move in wrestling.
Yeah.
No, but she's great. Dakota Kai is like fucking great. She's a great person.
The overdrive, also known as the ozone, also known as the playmaker.
Yeah, Dakota Kai's great. She deserves the world because she's fantastic. Great person.
Yep. And she seems to be very well liked by the women's roster.
Oh yeah, she seems like one of the most friendliest wrestlers around, honestly, from what I see.
Yeah, she's a typical Kiwi, I'd say.
Yeah, she's one of the boys.
Yep. She's from this very, very nice country that I live in. It honestly wouldn't surprise me if at some point, like, before I knew who she was, I probably like walked past her at the supermarket or something. Like that is an actual possibility. It's an actual possibility.
Oh yeah, it's absolutely possible.
Like I know the area that she lived in approximately, and it's probably like it's like 20 minutes drive from where I live right now. It's crazy. I also know the area that Lord lived in as well, which is the area where Adam lives. Anyway, yeah, Dakota Kai is underrated. For sure.
Give her all the belts.
All the belts. Have her beat Roman Reigns.
All the belts.
Have her beat Roman Reigns. Have her infiltrate, because she is Samoan, so have her infiltrate the bloodline and then win all of
have her beat Roman in a big dog match.
Or, I mean, if the Usos had still had the undisputed tag belts, you could have had the Usos with the tag belts, Reigns with all the world titles, and then Dakota Kai wins both the women's titles. Yeah. I mean, she's not part of that family, but you know.
No. I wouldn't much she is, no. But she is great. Fantastic.
Yeah. All right. My next choice is a bit of an interesting one because the gimmick has been represented by lots of different wrestlers, but I want to highlight a specific person who played this character. So it is Matt Bourne's version of Doink the Clown. This is specifically the heel Doink the Clown, not the babyface. Because the babyface Doink the Clown is shit. The babyface called Doink the Clown is cringe and had terrible, terrible, unfunny comedy matches in 1994, like the one that at WrestleMania 10, but especially the one at Survivor Series with Jerry Lawler and like all the clown midgets and the king midgets. I watched that match recently. It's absolutely horrendous. It's horrendous, unfunny midget comedy, and you got Vince McMahon on commentary going, it's so funny, such good shit. Anyway, before all of that garbage happened, you had Matt Bourne playing the heel Doink the Clown, who was genuinely one of the most scary fucking gimmicks ever. It was like, what's the clown character from It called? I can't remember the name.
Pennywise.
Yeah, it's basically like if Pennywise was a wrestler. And that theme song of, it starts with the clown, and then it goes into the... And for the new generation era at the time, which was still very much geared towards the child audience, Doink the Clown was one of the most fucking nightmare-fueling gimmicks ever. On top of that, Matt Bourne is also a very underrated wrestler. Fun fact, he actually wrestled Ricky Steamboat at WrestleMania 1 in 1985. He was around for a long time before he got the Doink gimmick, but yeah, heel Doink played by Matt Bourne was incredible. Absolutely scary beyond belief to this day still. He put everything he had into that character. He made it so believable. And yeah, unfortunately, I think because of like WWE's constant reusing of this gimmick, Doink the Clown is usually associated with, oh, he's the silly babyface clown gimmick that appears every now and then. I remember when Heath Slater had that run in 2012 leading up to Raw 1000 where he would get beaten by all the legends. Doink the Clown was actually one of the ones that Heath Slater beat. But again, that was babyface Doink. Unfortunately, Matt Bourne has passed away. And so they're kind of like posthumously bringing the gimmick back and just using different wrestlers playing the same character. But it's not the same, because babyface Doink is garbage. And it's a bit like what you said in the Money in the Bank video about the difference between Nikki Cross and Nikki ASH. Is like Nikki ASH is cringe and terrible, but Nikki Cross is awesome. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing with Doink the Clown. Heel Doink the Clown, played by Matt Bourne, is great, but babyface Doink the Clown, played by whoever was playing him, there's lots of different people playing him, is like Nikki ASH levels of shit. And it was basically just childish comedy for Vince to laugh at, and it was not funny, not entertaining, and why did they kill off heel Doink, who was one of the best gimmicks of the New Gen era? I think his theme song alone is enough to strike fear into kids. Anyway, who is your 13th choice?
My 13th choice is Bad News Barrett.
I will snap and will go with Wade Barrett as a whole. But yes, Bad News Barrett is his peak.
Yeah, great gimmick and perfect for him. He is such a good talker. He has got such a great look. I really like his finisher. Like just a straight elbow. Like you can make that seem really brutal and it's really cool.
Well, because he's a legit, he's a legit bare knuckle fighter. He deserved so much better in his run. Fucking hell.
He deserved more than just being Intercontinental Champion a couple times.
Well, 6 times I think it was, but
yeah,
you know,
well, the fact that I can't remember how many
Yeah.
times he's had it.
yeah,
Because he's such a good promo, such a great look, and such a good wrestler. Who you absolutely could build a company around. Around that time, you absolutely could have. And it's just a shame what they did to him, more than anything. Because he never recovered. He never recovered after the Nexus.
oh yeah,
Which is a fucking shame.
yeah. Well, the thing is that during the Nexus in the ring, he was still green, but as a character, he was the most captivating heel on Raw at the time in 2010, and genuinely, his segments were must see during the Nexus angle until John Cena buried the Nexus, and it was just never the same after that. And it took him so long to recover after that, and it wasn't until he got to the Bad News Barrett character that people really got behind him again. But again, it's a bit like what they do with a lot of heel wrestlers when they get over, is they refuse to turn them babyface. I remember the 2014 Hall of Fame. He came out in the middle of it and he got a massive pop. And I loved that promo he cut. He got on stage, he was doing that big smile he does. And I love that look at the time when he grew his beard out and he got ripped. He got, really in really good shape and started really good matches. But he cut that promo and he's just like, well, I'm afraid I've got some bad news. None of you people in this audience are ever going to be in the Hall of Fame. And everyone laughed. Everyone laughed. It was fucking great. I'm glad he's getting a run as commentator now, because he's a fantastic commentator as well.
Oh yeah, he's great.
Yeah, excellent. He was always one of my boys, He was always one of the guys I was always cheering for. And what would happen is they would build him up as like, oh yes, this is working. And then just out of nowhere, they'd turn him into a joke. Like when he won King of the Ring and feuded with R-Truth, it was just the fucking shit worst. They got rolled up in seconds. And then they put him in the League of Nations and he was always the one that got pinned. Every time.
Yeah, and the first one to be kicked out.
Yeah.
Got released.
Yeah. I mean, he asked for his release to be fair.
Yeah, obviously, yeah.
Yeah. And he hasn't returned to the ring since then. He stopped wrestling after that.
No, he hasn't. Yeah, he hasn't. He started a couple films. He was in WCPW, and then in the relaunch of World of Sport, I think? Which didn't last long, if I remember correctly.
Because of NXT UK. Killed it.
Yeah.
I really liked his time when he was a commentator on NXT, because he was a massive simp for Toxic Attraction. That was a great time for him. He was one of the best parts about that show. The way, like, whenever Mandy Rose or Gigi Dolan and JC Jane would come out, he'd always simp for them. It was a fantastic heel time. But I remember when the Nexus debuted and he was so over. He's like, John Cena, you're gonna get me a glass of water. Like when he made Cena like his slave within the Nexus. But he is so good at promos though. Like he was one of the best promos of like the early 2010s. He just, anytime he picked up a microphone, he was captivating. And he was able to he was just a natural on the microphone from a very early time in his career. But you're right, the Bad News Barrett stuff was... Do you know the story of how Bad News Barrett started?
No, not that I remember.
So there was this joke that Cody Rhodes did in like catering, where he said, oh, I knew this guy in the territories who used to wrestle my dad. His name was Bad News Barrett, and he came out saying, I'm afraid I've got some bad news. And everyone used to laugh at it, and then they included it on the JBL and Cole show on YouTube, and then that was so popular that they ended up actually putting it on TV. And then that got so over that they put the Intercontinental Championship on him. It's crazy. how Cody Rhodes can just start things that turn into like big deals. But yeah, you're damn right. Wade Barrett is one of the most underrated wrestlers. He was so damn good. He should have been world champion for sure. Whether that be during the Nexus run or whether that be as Bad News Barrett, he should have been world champion at some point. I think maybe the issue with the Bad News Barrett stuff is that around that time they unified the world titles, and because they only had one, the pecking order was a bit tighter. And they were having the belt on guys like, Bryan and Lesnar and Rollins, which I think was the right choices for the time. But in 2010, when the Nexus was at its peak, if they had won the SummerSlam match, I think he could have made a great world champion. Remember how he went from main eventing SummerSlam in 2010 to being, like, beaten in 2 minutes at WrestleMania 27 as the core. The core!
My team of choice is Xavier Woods.
Very good choice.
Always, again, very similar to Dakota Kai in a sense. He is also a gamer. Yeah. But he is also seen as the third wheel in a lot of ways in the New Day, when really he is also a fucking great wrestler with an amazing moveset. Always a great promo. Probably one of the funniest wrestlers, like, on the mic. He is so fucking funny.
Despite the fact that he's a gamer, he's always been in great physical shape as well.
Oh yeah, he's like insanely in shape. Puts on really good matches. He had a really good match with Gunther this year. Like, it was really good. And I wish he would probably get a bit more of a singles push at times, because he'd be a great mid-carder.
Yeah, I guess maybe now that Big E and Kofi have both won the WWE Championship, it's not a surprise that people see him as the third wheel, because he's the one that hasn't won a world title.
Yeah, but he's always been seen that way, because with Big E, he's always the younger guy who's always seen as the one to break out eventually. In Kofi Kingston, he's always the veteran. He's the experienced head of the group. And Woods is always seen as that guy, because he wasn't the one that wrestled as much as the other two. The other two were always the tag champions who wrestled more than Woods. He was always the guy with the trombone. And it was fantastic. He was great at it. But he's also a really good wrestler. He's great in the ring. He has a great moveset. His elbow off the ropes is always spectacular to watch. It's
interesting, though, because whenever someone says the New Day, the first person I think of is Xavier Woods.
I do in a sense as well, because he's sort of that representation of the gimmick more than Kofi and Big E in a way. But he's always the guy who doesn't wrestle as much, especially during their peak, in like 2016, 17. Yeah, but I think he's great and he deserves more of a singles push.
He's an excellent entertainer. I think his work on Up Up Down Down shows his real ability as an entertainer. And it shows that when you allow him to just be himself, he can be so great. I think the biggest issue is when he has to do like scripted, corny shit. Like Vince McMahon has given the New Day a lot of that stuff. I think my favorite run of the New Day, though, was when they were heel in 2015. That was so funny. When they were heel in 2015, they were one of the best things about the show. I remember it was like around like SummerSlam 2015. The New Day was absolutely hilarious. It was like, I remember they went to I think it may have been like Tennessee or something. And Kofi Kingston cut a heel promo, which is rare because Kofi's usually a babyface for his whole career. But he cut this heel promo. He's just like, this is not my character. Country music sucks. But yeah, no, Woods is excellent. My flatmate actually met Xavier Woods when they were in New Zealand in 2016. He was at the arcade, obviously. Where else would you find Xavier Woods? They went to the arcade and Xavier Woods was just there and they got a picture with him. Xavier Woods is also... He also always finds new ways to make his attires really interesting.
Oh, yeah.
I remember he went through that phase where he wore those weird shoes that curved up. His work on Up Up Down Down is really good.
Oh, yeah, it's great fun.
And his rivalry with Tyler Breeze on the GM mode was so fun.
I remember the stream he did with Chugs, Breeze, Woods, and Johnny. I think they played. What game was it? I can't remember, but they did a match, and then fucking it was a mod for like all like the like current day wrestlers. And after the match, like one of them played as Styles and won. It's a great shot of like Styles looking in the air, mouth closed, like mouth open, and his eye closed, and it's like ah, and then they all just go like phenomena. It's such a fucking good meme. Oh, yeah. It's so funny.
Yeah,
I love it. It's one of those jokes that I've always referenced like whenever I can.
Yeah.
Phenomena.
I love this one specifically, one where it's Xavier Woods, Tyler Breeze, Adam Cole, and Cesaro playing Uno, and they just get progressively more fucking good. Dude, the party is fucking great. Yeah, it's such a shame though when Vince shut down all the streaming stuff and they had to end it.
Thankfully, they can do it again now. Thank God.
Yeah.
Took me like 2 years. Fucking hell.
Yeah, but it's such a shame because they ended it like when it was in its hot streak as well.
Yeah, and obviously Cole and Claudio have gone to AEW, and Tyler's right now seemingly a trainer.
He is. Now. Yeah, he is hired by WWE. They kind of use him as a utility in the sense that he can train in the Performance Center, but he can also be part of the up down down channel.
Yeah, that's great.
I absolutely love how they made Xavier Woods and Tyler Breeze choosable GMs in 2K23.
Oh, it's so great. It's so great. It's so fun.
I love it how Tyler Breeze is a legend in the game as a playable wrestler, but his rating is really low. It's like 76 or something stupid. That's another. He's not on the list, but Tyler Breeze is another underrated wrestler for sure. He never got a fair shake. He was great in NXT. Tyler Breeze.
He was. He deserved on the main roster.
All right, my 15th and final choice is a guy who was most known for his time in ECW. He also was briefly in WCW and WWE as well, and unfortunately, he is also another wrestler that has passed away. But this guy. We're talking before about Dominik Dijakovic being a guy who, for his size, is really impressive as an athlete. It is Mike Awesome. And he has a famous set of matches in ECW with Masato Tanaka. But Mike Awesome he's one of the best athletes from 90s wrestling as a whole. He has some of the best in-ring work from that era, mostly in ECW. He was tall, massive, but he was gonna do insane ballsy shit. I mean, a lot of the ECW guys were like that, but he would always go balls to the walls in his matches, and he was always very blunt with his promos. I think I saw one yesterday, like on YouTube. It was just like, "I'm gonna beat the shit out of you. You're gonna die." It's like so over the top extreme, but it's so funny. But it's like so perfect for the vibe of ECW. And like, oh my god, he is just, anytime he had a match, it was just like, it was kicking ass, balls to the walls. He was strong, tall, powerful, but also athletic at the same time. He could work a technical match, but he could also work a hardcore style, hard-hitting brawl. And he had such a unique, like, physical look to him. I think what really derailed his career was when he jumped ship to WCW for the pay, which sucked. And there was this really unique bit of trivia where Mike Awesome was the ECW champion and he was in WCW. He came back to ECW to lose the title to Taz, who was in WWE. So a WWE wrestler beat a WCW wrestler for the ECW championship, which is just a weird way to think about it. But yeah, basically that's kind of, unfortunately, what cut his career's momentum out was the WCW run, because the booking was just atrocious. And at the time, WCW was so loaded with top guys that he just couldn't fit anywhere comfortably. Whereas in a company like ECW, he actually stood out, and he was able to shine properly. And once once WCW was bought and ECW was bought by WWE, it was just much like Sean O'Haire. There was just no room for him at all, really. But yeah, no, Mike Awesome is so underrated. He's one of the most talented guys the business has ever seen. And I think it's only really when you, in terms of talking about his place in history and when people talk about him, it's only when people say, oh, what were the best matches in ECW? Then they will remember him. They'll go, oh yes, Mike Awesome versus Masato Tanaka had some of the best matches. Yeah, it's crazy how wrestling did him wrong, because he had a great look, he had a great presence, and he was a fucking incredible wrestler. The career sort of fucked up once he got to WCW, when he was booked as like, he was given like a 70s gimmick, and then he became like a fat chick Thriller, which is just like Vince Russo bullshit shenanigans. But yeah, and then later in his life things spiraled out. There's a lot of controversy around his career and his life and all that. And unfortunately in 2007 he got arrested because he had an incident with his wife, which is really sad. Yeah, unfortunately he committed suicide, which is really sad. It's a lot like the Sean O'Haire thing, really. With Sean O'Haire, it was a WCW talent who came in at the wrong time, and with the invasion just couldn't shine, and bad booking and all that. But with Mike Awesome, he had a great run in ECW. Like, it's actually there. You can go on the WWE Network and watch it. And he was an incredible ECW champion. And yet, for some reason, his name just never comes up when it comes to talking about, like, the legends of wrestling. His name just doesn't appear in history. Maybe partly, understandably, possibly because of the last year of his life and all the controversy around it with, the domestic abuse and the jail time and the suicide and all that. But in terms of as a talent, fantastic. Super underrated. Anyway, who is your 15th and final choice?
My last choice is the world's strongest man, Mark Henry.
The Hall of Pain.
Hall of Pain. He probably deserved more than that just one really good run. As that run is fucking good. It's a really good fucking run, a really great gimmick. He probably deserved a bit more than that overall in his whole career, because he is such a unique... Obviously, there's a lot of big guys in wrestling. There's a lot. Most of them aren't very good, really. But Mark is such a unique talent with such a great presence in the ring and on the mic. Like,
oh, yeah.
That promo he cut, it's a reference to death. But his promo of his fake retirement generally is one of the best twist promos ever. It's one of the best. Because he acts his arse off. And every single person probably who probably first saw that promo for the first time probably believed it fully. Like, I can't imagine anybody thought that this was for a twist. I can tell
you my thoughts at the time. I thought it was real at first, but once John Cena walked out, I was like, oh no, this is suspicious. This feels weird. I didn't fully expect the twist, but I could sniff something was up when Cena walked out.
It's the whole, like, him, like, tearing up and, like, generally, like, responding to the crowd. Like, he responded to the crowd at some point with a cheeky line, which I thought was quite fun. Like, dummy, like, something like that. It was very fun, very heartwarming.
You're a bunch of puppets.
what I like about it, it's probably like there's a lot of it that's probably obviously I don't know Mark personally, but I imagine he took a lot of stuff that was real about his journey and like his sort of relationship with his family, you know, which really like played into it, and I think really sold it super well. He's also like surprisingly like I mentioned a bit ago, like really well acted. Like it's a really well acted promo, and it's really believable, and it's such a great idea for a veteran angle. Unfortunately, it just doesn't go anywhere really that like goes beyond that, because no one ever really talks about what happens after. No one talks about like what that did for him going forward with this.
Yeah,
potential...
I remember watching the Money in the Bank 2013 pay-per-view, and there were so many people in the crowd chanting for Mark Henry to beat Cena.
Yeah, it's such a there's a lot of potential for that to be used well in the future. Obviously, if I imagine it will be done at some point as well, but it will obviously be a reference to this, because I feel like this promo really was kind of wasted overall because of how good this promo is, and it wasn't done it justice after that. Is a big shame. But the Hall of Pain run is one of the best world title reigns. It's probably for me the most memorable in WWE, honestly. Obviously you have like Christian, I think, is another, and it's just that it was what I love about 2011, not just obviously for this all the CM Punk stuff, but the world title reign from like Money in the Bank onwards or so, like with all the Randy Orton and Christian stuff, even probably just from Mania actually, because that leads into Christian's initial reign, and then all the Randy Orton stuff, and then it goes to the Mark Henry, then it goes all the way to Daniel Bryan at TLC. It's such a great, like, it's probably the best that title got in the entirety of
SmackDown,
at least the last decade.
I mean, SmackDown in 2011 in general is underrated because it gets so overshadowed by the Summer of Punk.
Yeah. But that sort of like run of the world title is such a great transitional period from that initial Christian stuff to go to the Mark Henry stuff to then go to the Daniel Bryan stuff. Like that just like 9-month period is such a wealth of like well done stories and title reigns. You know, that's quite cool to see.
And actually, funnily enough, the Hall of Pain run actually did connect with the Summer of Punk in a way, because I remember Mark Henry retired Vladimir Kozlov, right? He did the whole Hall of Pain steel chair gimmick thing where he broke his leg. And, like, firstly, that got Mark Henry over as a dominant heel because he's like, I retired Vladimir Kozlov. And then on Raw, CM Punk chewed out John Laurinaitis for wishing him his future endeavors. So that also impacted the Summer of Punk storyline as well, which is great how that all connected. Yeah. But yeah, Mark Henry's Hall of Pain run got cut short because of injury, unfortunately. And it's crazy because, like, the first 15 years of his career in WWE was pretty terrible for a lot of it. He got used every now and then. You know, he had the casket match with The Undertaker at WrestleMania, but the only reason he had that is because it was supposed to originally be the match he had with Kurt Angle at No Way Out, but then Eddie Guerrero passed away, and so they instead changed it to with Rey Mysterio winning the championship in the triple threat match. And so they did the Mark Henry match instead. And, you know, he had a couple of different dips into sort of territory of main event status here and there. And, like, you know, he was in the Nation of Domination as well in the Attitude Era. And obviously Sexual Chocolate is one that people talk about a lot. That weird storyline where Mae Young gave birth to a hand. Weird time. 1999 is weird. But yeah, no, like, the first 15 years of his run were, like, really fucking shoddy in terms of booking. like even his ECW reign in 2008 was really forgettable. But then suddenly in 2011, 15 years into his career, he suddenly became one of the best things about WWE. And he's one of the most underrated promos as well. He's such a great talker. And he's able to make you believe, not just because he's such a compelling and convincing speaker, because he's actually legitimately a world's strongest man winner. So he actually has the records to prove that he's a legit athlete. I remember it was like there was that segment he did on SmackDown once where he pulled 2 trucks across a street. And then, like, you know, he showed like he could bend a frying pan with his hands and all that. And that's all stuff he can do. He's a strong fucking guy. But yeah, I think, yeah, he had a lot of injuries, and I think maybe he gets underrated because he's not the most like exciting in-ring wrestler, because he's a super heavyweight. And he's quite limited, athletically speaking. But what Mark Henry can do is he can make you believe he's going to win a match because he's a legit athlete. You know what I mean? He's more like he's one of those guys. Oh, and how could we forget the match with the Big Show where they break the ring at Vengeance? That's a great moment in the Hall of Pain run. Obviously, they already did it with Lesnar in 03 on SmackDown, but it still was a good fit for the Hall of Pain run anyway, to do the ring break. And I think what was unexpected about it is that it wasn't the last match on the show, because they had a Cena Del Rio match after that on the broken ring, which is really unique. But you know, you got a point there, because Mark Henry's a Hall of Famer, so it's weird to have an underrated Hall of Famer, but they do exist. I think a lot of people on this list deserve to be in the Hall of Fame, for sure. So we'll just quickly read through the list again. William Regal, Stevie Richards, Dirty Dutch Mantel, Damien Sandow, Jazz, Dean Malenko, Sean O'Hare, Christian Cage, Dominic Dijakovic, Chad Gable, Cesaro, Brian Pillman, Doink the Clown, Wade Barrett, Mike Awesome. And then what was yours?
Yeah, you got Mark Henry, Hack, Chad Gable, Dakota Kai, Bailey, Elias from 2018, Rusev,
Joseph Connors and Joe Henry.
Joseph, yeah, fucking hell. Oh, those two were so good in WCPW. Yeah, just so many, like, these guys and girls, like, for me, like, the ones that I've picked up, ones that I always feel like it could have been stepped up a level. And some of them still can.
The real question is, will we do a 15 overrated wrestlers video at some point?
Probably.
Yeah. I feel like that one's tougher, but it's possible. Yeah. Overrated wrestlers is a tough one. I think that one changes a lot as well over time. Like, there's wrestlers I used to think were overrated and I don't anymore, and then there's wrestlers I didn't at the time and now I do think they are. And also, sometimes there are wrestlers that are overrated for a period of time, but not all of their career, only like slightly for a bit. And there's even, in some cases, wrestlers that are overrated at some points and underrated in others. The most boring list would be 15 wrestlers that got exactly the push they deserved.
Got exactly what they deserve.
The most balanced rated wrestlers. In the comments, tell us your 15 underrated wrestlers if you'd like to.
No, nothing really. I think we've got 2 really good lists, I think.
We'll see you all later. Bye bye.